They did not even discuss it because Senate Minority Leader James Orengo asked the Speaker to allow them to go back into more further consultations on this. No senator, like we had the Majority Whip sitting telling here last week, no senator wants to be the one who's accused of superintending the loss of money to a county. Governors are going to use that and say, look at this senator. He was there in the Senate. And look at how much money we are receiving now. We're going to lose. Some governors are saying that this whole delay is a ploy by some senators who want to become governors in the next election to try and hold back on development by the governors.
Whichever way you look at it, unfortunately, whether you say that no senator wants to be the one that said that one should get more or less than the other, or whether you look at it as it is now, because unfortunately, these folks can't move until Senate does something and gets this sorted out. So whichever way you want to look at it, people are going to point fingers at the Senate. We're not able to pay salaries. We're not able to continue with our development projects within the counties because the Senate has failed to come up with a strategy or a formula that's going to allow all of us then to get money. So whichever way they're pointing fingers, look at what
they are being paid their salary.
Yes, they are. Look at what Laikipia governor is saying now. I read deep intrigue and sabotage against devolution. And as far as he's concerned, there is a way out of this. There is a way out of it, but then they are refusing to take that way. So could be one that would be blamed or the entire...
Were there issues on this matter with the previous allocation plan? The answer is yes.
Previous two. Remember, this is the
last
third.
two. This is the third. This is the third goal they're having at
formula.
this. Yeah.
Yes.
The third formula.
So in short, there's never been a formula that has been generally acceptable to all the governors, correct? Mm-hmm. And they won't be.
It's not possible to do something whereby everybody is going to be satisfied. It's not possible, especially when you're dealing with things like money, and then you're dealing with the fact that regional areas of which the counties are made up of are not equal. The populations are not equal.
This reminds me.
So it's not possible. Now, if you had a case where the geographical areas were equal, the population in each and every county, region were equal, and then everybody's getting a certain amount, then that's the only time that everybody would be satisfied.
We started off with this understanding from the very beginning. There were counties that were more populous. There were counties that had more land than they had people. But it's the same thing. Remember, we were told at the very beginning the amount of money, for instance, the judiciary received during the Kibaki era. There was a lot of infrastructural development that they required. So the argument that came to my mind was, fine, you can't expect that same budget, especially when it is assumed you have put up what you wanted to put up. Now, I would argue that if I were to look at counties, I would argue those who set up the allocation at the very beginning looked and said, some counties are disadvantaged infrastructurally.
Yeah.
So let's try and get them to a point where the disadvantage is lessened completely. So arguably, how many years have we had? This is our second year, isn't it? The second, no.
So 10.
Second period.
Second
Yes,
period.
exactly. Yes, exactly. Not year, second period. So you assume that during the first 5 years, some of these things ought to have been brought to a certain level that they weren't before. Now, if you're to continue with this argument, then you would say, indeed, there is need for us to relook at how it is we are going to fund.
And it's a constitutional requirement.
Yes.
And the drafters of the constitution basically had this in mind, that you have this formula and it factors as a couple of things, and then you keep changing it because
things keep changing. Yes.
So you get to a point now, this third basis formula, and it's been given a whole political twist and turns into it, and saying that, those counties that are sparsely populated are now being marginalized. We're taking them back to marginalization. Basics of it, the third basis formula, just to give you the parameters. So it looks at several parameters. It says, look at health and allocate 17% on health, agriculture 10%, population 18%, poverty 14%, a basic share for all the counties 20%, land area 8%, rural access 4%, urban households 5%, fiscal effort 2%, and financial prudence 2%. Okay. Now, in previous ones, you had issues like population not having such a high percentage as 18%, because now this one has the second highest after the basic share. You had land area taking a higher percentage. Now, those that come from those vast counties are arguing that, look, we were marginalized for 50 years of this country's since this country's independence. For 50 years. You don't expect that we're going to be able to catch up in such a short time. For us to be able to provide health facilities, for example, we need to look at how many people are in this particular area that require a health facility. We go and put up that health facility because the next nearest health facility is going to be hundreds of kilometers away. In the densely populated areas, you can say that, yes, this one health facility is catering for 1 million people, and so you require to build a bigger one, but the 1 million people are within a short distance and they can access it. This 100,000 people or 10,000 people that would access this health facility in a vast area would need to still walk many kilometers to access it. So there's a whole balance of, do we still need money to develop infrastructure from roads to these basic amenities?
So the question I would ask is, then how many years would these areas need to be able to feel that they have been given sufficient money and sufficient time?
And then they become independent or even semi-independent.
Or to catch up, because the issue is catching up. Essentially, they've made this a social, what is the word? Well, the word was in my mind, then it's disappeared.
It's gone.
Social injustice.
Okay.
Yes. That's what they made the social injustice issue.
Yep.
And it is true. Some areas were genuinely marginalized for the very longest time. But you see, the so-called bringing them into the 20th and then 21st century did not begin with devolution. Not really. No. The Kibaki government came in before devolution.
Yes, it did.
Yes. And within the Kibaki government's time or tenure, these changes that we talk about had begun. It had begun. Remember, if you go to look at development and progress, I mean, let's look at this thing wholesomely. Huh? Something like CDF, which was never available, was available to everybody in the country.
Yeah.
It was a start. Then there was a realization, okay, when you have the counties, more money. That more money was given. Okay? This has been my argument. With the money that has been given, can we assuredly say that we can say that the development projects that had been planned are commensurate to the money that has been given? It has to be asked.
It has to be asked, and I think the question in some cases then is quite obvious. The answer rather is obvious that it obviously is not. It has not happened in the manner in which it should have.
So it means that even if more money is given, there is no guarantee that the said development projects will again be implemented as suggested. Because, you see, we're at the level of talk. This is what we need. Sorry, wrong statement. This is what we want.
Yeah.
Okay? But as to this is what we need. Again, remember, the disadvantages they speak of are real in this sense. Huh? For the longest time, we had provinces, and provinces had headquarters. And development was actually mostly centered around headquarters. Why? That's where most people were. Okay?
Yeah.
But if you travel around this country, most of this country, what will surprise you is just how much work the government did within the country during those days. Remote places that you would never think would have certain infrastructural development, you would find it. Now, we lost time and we sort of like clawed back time and started going back into time instead of moving forward. That's where these things now became a problem and became glaringly clear that things were definitely wrong. I say this because I've been to some parts of the country where I'm wondering how on earth did this health facility reach here? But clearly it was built. There may be a tree growing right in the middle of one particular building.
But it's there.
It was clearly built and somehow it just wasn't used. I was being told a story by friends of mine who work for the Commission on Revenue Allocation that one of the things that they found when they went to Nyeri, something very interesting, was the first government built a government headquarters with a sort of like a parliament 40 kilometers from Nyeri. Nobody goes there.
So the county assembly is basically far from
the old county council offices and there's a hotel in town, I'm trying to remember whether it was called the Intercontinental or the Hilton, that's where you'll find most people in the course of the day.
That's where business is transacted.
That particular structure just sits there. Nobody goes there.
Why?
You see, now those are the questions you want to ask, because if you want to look at, say, for instance...
Is it that the members of the county assembly are not facilitated to travel to that 40 kilometers? I mean, surely. They come from wards that are farther than 40 kilometers from the town.
They do. You know, now, this is where now social factors and social alignments come in. And why I'm using the word social alignments, I'm trying to use very gentle terms. You will also find that there are counties where, when you're talking about devolution and how it is they utilize their funds, it doesn't follow what you may think as a very scientific method. They follow the method of calling clans and saying, what do you need? Sincerely, and the money is given. That way you maintain peace. Because if you don't, you cannot say the money has been given to the county and then the county decided, the clans decide what they need.
Yeah.
Now, I'm arguing if it works, fine.
It works fine.
Good. If work still if work is continuing and it is being carried out, then if that's the method in which you choose to go about it, then it's all right.
Now, I think this is where now the rubber meets the road. If the things that were required actually got done, would you really hear this huge hue and cry?
There you go.
There wouldn't be a lot of back and forth.
There always is a back and forth.
But you see, if you look at the kind of reaction that you've heard on this third basis formula, it mainly comes from the counties in the northeastern part of the country. Okay? And those ones. And then the others that were... So the ones that were set to lose from this new formula are the ones that are complaining. The ones that are set to gain are sort of like just quiet. So you ask yourself, so why is it that we are not hearing the leadership from these areas coming out to say, look, this is what has been going on? For example, we've been talking about, the case, and the argument has there been for a very long time. Look at a county that is neighboring Nairobi, like Kiambu. Kiambu is, for all intents and purposes, one of the bedrooms of Nairobi County.
It is.
So very many of the people who come to Nairobi during the day
on a daily basis
go back to
Kiambu
and Kajiado and Machakos.
Yes, they do.
Right? So if you look at the infrastructure and the facilities and amenities in Kiambu, is Kiambu County government getting enough money to support the services that ought to be given to these people?
The answer would be a no.
Okay. Over the last 50 years or so, now we are approaching 60, we'll be in 60 years of independence soon. Over those many years, has Kiambu been getting a lot more allocation from the national government for development?
I don't know, but...
How many large hospitals do you have in Kiambu?
That you can speak of?
That you can speak of.
They just have ordinary hospitals like any other former...
but accessible to them.
Very accessible.
Right?
And many other health facilities
the level
as well.
5s. You've got a thicker level 5, you've got Kiambu, you've got other health facilities in the area. Basically, if you compare those health facilities in Kiambu to the health facilities in Wajir.
Oh no, the disparity is...
Incomparable, I think.
Okay.
But there's a... No. Folks, let's take into consideration some of the factors, okay?
Yep.
Hospitals as well as schools, many of them were community effort. Not all. They're predominantly government, but they were community effort. Similar with schools. Community effort, what they call Harambe. The community feel they need it, so they start it and hope the government will populate it, and the government used to, and they did. Okay? Now, all I'm saying is this. If you come from a place like Northeastern, where even the road getting there was no road.
Yeah.
And we know that one of the factors of development when you talk of infrastructure, is a road.
Yeah.
Now, so if it isn't there, how are you going to develop?
Well, there you go. I think that now it segues to what Eric was saying, is that by virtue of the fact that you have some of these counties that are dormitory counties to Nairobi, you would find that the infrastructure then that was needed to develop, by virtue of the fact that they were so close, then it went without saying that some of this infrastructure was developed at a quicker rate than it would be in other counties like Wajir or Mandera, for example, by virtue of the fact that you had, or that you bore proximity to the center of things, or the center of power, as it were, then the likelihood of your infrastructure being developed at a faster rate then was higher.
You know, that advantage began long even before independence. Because you only need to consider who it is who lived in those areas. Remember, some of the biggest coffee farms we have came from that particular place, that
Yep.
particular region. Now, long before we got independence and Africans started owning it, where do you think the people who colonized us were going to focus their efforts when it came to development? Remember, we were natives. And as far as they were concerned, there's certain things we didn't need. They are not considered basic needs for Africans. Electricity being one of them,
Yeah.
or even a good road. After all, they found us walking through the bush.
Keep on walking.
You were fine. You were doing
and
okay.
we're good with it, mingling with snakes and monkeys. So why are we now
Carry
kicking
on.
a fuss and wanting tarmac roads? But the point is this. This cry must be taken seriously in this light. That disadvantage, that huge disadvantage actually has to be reduced. But this is the reason why the issue of counties came in. The issue was, we want an opportunity for people to actually have money to develop their own backyard.
Yep.
That was the whole idea. Now, this hasn't happened. Forget the story now of them not receiving money. We are in the what? Our 7th year?
The last 7 years,
Yes.
what is it that the governments have done
Thank you, Eric.
to
You've
involve the people?
got it. That is really the question I'm asking. What is it that they've done for their people? Central government, only problem you'll have with them is they don't give you money. But they have been getting money. What have they done?
What have they done with it? So now, if you want to now lend or borrow from the federal system, whereas you have the central government, and then you have state governments, then, which is like we've looked at before, every state then essentially has their own mini president. And they're not only responsible for governing the land, but what they're also responsible for is upping the economic profile of that particular state. So you must have income generation, you must have, multiple revenue streams for the state, as it were, to then complement whatever it is that you would get from the federal government. So never at one point would you find yourself in a state like this whereby you're saying, well, we're unable to operate. Number one, we cannot pay state salary. We cannot pay this, that, the other thing because we don't have money. Whereas the responsibility was upon you then to create income streams for your state and for your employees, so that whatever you get from federal government is not what you're surviving on. So you as state and you as the mini president, which with now their governors of that state, you are required then to run certain things. So you go to any state across the Federal Republic and you find that, all right, this is what they have and this is what they have used. This is what they have and this is what they have used. It should not be that after so long you find that there's some people or there's some states that are in abject poverty and they're not able to operate. Why?
And they've received money.
And they've received money. It should not be.
You see why it becomes a talking point is because other counties have received money and you can see what they have done with
their
it. Money.
it.
You can see.
Yeah. Even if it is one thing.
You can see. You can see and say, oh, actually, this place is very different. You can actually see.
You can see. The people say devolution works.
Yes.
Because
in fact, they are delighted with
because
devolution.
they can feel the effects.
They can. And unfortunately, when you look at the number of governors who have cases with DCI and ethics and anti-corruption over these very matters of managing these money that are given to them, it tells you where the money went, and it tells you that the things that they were supposed to do, they clearly did not do.
And if you want to go further, then you start to ask yourself the question is that by the time these individuals are being appointed, elected, whatever way in which they got into that position, okay, what was the end goal? Was the end goal then really for the development of the people and the development of the area? Or was it to have a plum position whereby they could then manipulate to, increase their personal wealth or influence?
Actually,
and you have to ask yourself that question at the end of the day.
Because
if it wasn't, perhaps the development that you are crying for, you would have seen it across the country.
I actually believe many of these people, believe me, start off with a genuine desire to see change, sincerely. Because not to believe that, then we would be arguing that we have some of the thickest, most stupid voters on the planet who can be fooled.
Some people would say that is
no,
the case.
it is not true.
Some people would tell you
It
that
is not
there's no...
true.
So the candidates begin as
Genuine people, and even if you look, some of them have a good track record. Believe me, there's something they have done that makes people feel, if this guy gets in, we're
going to
sorted.
sort us out.
So along the way,
Okay,
so
let's
along
take
the
a
way,
break.
what happens?
Let's take a break. We'll come back and you tell us along the way then what happens. Why is it then that we see that the people that are elected, people are very, very feeling disenfranchised with the people that they've elected into office? It's 25 minutes after 7 o'clock. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting on Spice FM and KTN Home. We're taking a quick break and then we come back and continue this conversation. The new revenue formula, is it openly ignoring equity Is it seeking to equalize some counties that have been receiving less funds than they should have been receiving? Well, it's a constitutional requirement that there shall be a new formula. The senators have not agreed on this, and let's see what they're going to do this week. Good morning.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM.
All right, still quite chilly in Nairobi this morning. We're looking at mostly cloudy conditions for most parts of the day. Highs of 21 and lows of 11. It's 13 degrees and cloudy conditions in Nyeri. Highs of 19 and lows of 12 with showers expected for early on in the day. In Nakuru at 13 degrees, we will see showers later with highs of 21 and then lows of 13. Eldoret is mostly cloudy this morning at 12 degrees. Thunderstorms are forecasted for later with highs of 19 and lows of 12. And in Kisumu at 18 degrees, it's mostly sunny this morning. However, that'll change later with rains in the afternoon with highs of 27 and lows of 18. Kakamega at 16 degrees is partly cloudy this morning. Rains expected later with highs of 24 and lows of 15. It's partly cloudy in Malindi at 25 degrees. Highs of 28 and lows of 24. Mostly cloudy conditions in Mombasa today at 23 degrees currently. We'll see then highs of 28 and lows of 23. 18 degrees and partly cloudy in Kampala. Highs of 26 and lows of 18. All right, let's look into Dar es Salaam where it's partly cloudy at 22 degrees. Highs of 29 and lows of 21. Taking a look down south in Joburg at 6 degrees, I beg your pardon. Clear skies all through today. Sunny conditions with highs of 20 and lows of 3. We'll wrap things up for now in Lagos where it's 24 degrees with clear skies this morning, but there'll be a bit of a sprinkle later on with highs of 28 and lows of 23.
The weather with Spice FM.
Mombasa Road, where we have that trailer that had taken over parts of the road this morning, right around Kitengela. That is still being sorted out right now. As you approach from Green Park Estate towards the Athi River Junction, you must approach with caution because that trailer is yet to be moved, and that's causing a massive traffic jam, tailing all the way far back, as you can see. So that affects traffic all the way then towards the SGR and then out then towards the JKIA turnoff. So it looks like there will be some manic Monday morning madness as far as traffic is concerned. All right, looking at Westlands coming into the CBD, it's not too bad. Thika Road also, as we come into the CBD, approaching the Globe Cinema roundabout, looks like a dream, as do other parts of the city for now. We'll take a look at what's happening in other parts of the country. Let us know what you see in your neck of the woods. Let us know how we can make people move a little quicker and smoother this morning. Not to forget, Spice of MKE on Twitter.
Thank you very much for tuning in to Spice FM. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. In the room, this and every morning is Eric Latif, Nduoko, and C.T. Muga. We broadcast from Nairobi, 94.4. We're in Mombasa, 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu. If you're in Eldoret, you can catch us on 96.7, Nakuru, 96.0, Malindi, 97.7, Nyeri, 90.9. Anywhere in the world on www.spicefm.co.ke. We also live stream this show on our social media handles, SpiceFM.ke, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And this morning, for the next 1 hour as well, and 1.5 hours as well, we are on KTN Home. We are discussing the new revenue formula that has completely split the Senate. They are unable to agree. Politics has crept in. It has gone into politics of the BBI, politics of NASA versus Jubilee. Everything has been thrown into this kitchen sink. In fact, there's even an opinion piece that is published on today's Standard on page 16 by a gentleman called Ibrahim Sheikh, who's a resident of Wajir, and he's said to be commenting on various topical issues. He is against this formula completely. In fact, he starts off his opinion piece with this narrative about folklore has it that once there was a man who was herding 99 camels in the fields. He came across a lonely man who had only one camel. And what did this man do? Without any hesitation or sympathy, he started strategizing on how to obtain the one camel from the herdsman to add to his flock so that his can be 100 camels. And he says this is exactly what we are seeing now. Counties that were previously, getting a lot of funds from the government, and counties that were not getting any funds from the government, it's 99 versus 1. And now, those counties that were getting the 99 still want to go even for the 1. From the counties that were historically marginalized. He goes to narrate how, historically the skewed development policies of the colonial era that were largely inherited by the post-independent ruling class, and the situation in those counties never improved. He ends this piece by saying, development of a country is always a deliberate process, and we should be very deliberate and honest in addressing our national challenges.
In that statement, he is absolutely right. Yes.
He's arguing that, this formula is going to starve very many counties of much needed revenue.
If people feel they've been ostracized, they will behave in a manner that indicates that they have been ostracized. It's a feeling that has been felt in the coast, northeastern province, some parts of the western part of Kenya, the Luo Nyanza area. People have felt that there's a period in the history of this country when they were marginalized. Now, there are people even in central Kenya during a period of our history also felt they were being marginalized.
Yep.
You see, that's where that statement of it becomes true, because it has to be a deliberate effort to be aware of our circumstances in our history and to say, we don't want to actually go back to that. So, and maybe this is what the senators are struggling with. how do we at least approximate something that people can live with?
But how do we become honest as well with all ourselves, okay? And get to a point and agree, this is what we have done for the last period. Now let's shift focus a bit, try it out for another period so that you can bring these ones up to par, and then you can reverse. What's wrong with saying that this third basis formula, let's change some of these parameters?
Yes.
So in the last two basis formulas, we were looking at the parameters, looking at this vastly,
the large geographical areas
with not a high population, but then we're getting the money so that you can get to par. These counties with huge populations but smaller in terms of geography, not getting as much money. Okay, so at this point, let's try and change things the other way around, because the population in these counties, in Western, in North Rift, not just in Central, because the conversation has been skewed to appear it's like Uhuru is pushing for this formula so that he can benefit his Central Kenya backyard. The bigger beneficiaries are actually in other counties.
Actually, Kiambu that people speak of, even with this old formula, was disadvantaged. If we are looking at disadvantage from the eyeglasses that has been looked at in this one here. And yet, these projects and their location are not meant for open fields. They are meant for individual people to benefit from. So, if there are more people, it means their needs will be more. It's really, this is not really complicated. Okay? Now, if you have a large area and you want many, so are we looking for money to service the area, or are we looking for money so that the people who live there, who are not that populous, can actually benefit? Now, this is something probably, and many others that I can't think of, that the senators are grappling with. But you don't have to please everyone. You just have to arrive at a point where people can live with. You can say, okay, this we can manage. It's like, at what point is money ever enough for most people?
There you go. And I think that's why I agree with Ibrahim in that what he has put out there in that opinion piece is that I think leaders now we have to get to the point. Leaders must get to the point now where they're being extremely honest. Is that the truth of the matter is that with what you get, there is something you can actually do. And we also have to come to the premise that development begets development. Once you begin to develop and honestly develop a certain area,
very true,
it is very possible for that development to then multiply by virtue of to bring in more, by virtue of the fact that you have started. But why is it so difficult to get to that point where you actually start and continue that with what you have?
Why can't you get there in the first place?
Why can't you get there in the first place with whatever it is that you have been given?
Eric,
and if you're going to ask the question, why is it that some people then, with what they have been given, have been able to develop? Why is it?
Eric, let's speak to the senator from Kitui, and this is Senator Enoch Wambua. Kitui is one of those counties that, if this formula went through, would lose some money. All right. Now, let's hear what he thinks about this. Senator, good morning.
Good morning, Eric. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Welcome to the Situation Room, and thank you very much for speaking to us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Your work is cut out in the Senate.
Yes, it is.
In terms of this particular formula. What do the people of Kitui, because it's the people of Kitui who you heard their voice and they told you to vie for Senate and then they elected you.
Yes.
What are they telling you now?
Thanks, Latif. I heard you saying that Kitui is likely to lose some money. I want to correct that statement. Kitui is going to lose a lot of money if this formula goes through. Kitui is supposed to be losing in excess of 432 million Kenya shillings. Now, lastly, I think it's important that we understand the genesis of this challenge. And the first question for people to ask themselves would be, why did we have devolution in the first place in the Constitution 2010? The chapter on devolution is supposed to address issues of equitable distribution of resources and sharing of revenue across the 47 counties. The disparities in development in sections of this country was brought about by a systematic formula of making decisions at the boardroom in Nairobi for people who are very far away from the center. Problems that were created by the sessional paper number 10 of 1965 on African socialism and its application to planning in Kenya. That's the paper that created marginalized regions, because the principal argument in that paper was that the national government should put money in productive areas that have high levels of rainfall, areas that have arable land, areas that are easily accessible. And just by the stroke of the pen, we created marginalized regions. Now, for purposes of devolution, we were supposed to address that very issue to make sure that areas that have been left behind in development are brought to par with areas that for more than 40 years had enjoyed a lot of allocation of resources from the national government. So today, Latif, without belaboring the point, if you bring a formula to share revenue among counties, and a county like Mandera is supposed to lose 1.9 billion Kenya shillings, will there be any count talk about in Mandera, really?
Let's talk about the last two formulas that where the county like Mandera gained 1.9 billion shillings. So for 7 years of devolution, the county of Mandera has received 1.9 billion shillings that we're now looking at it losing.
Yes.
What was the reason for giving it that extra 1.9 billion shillings? Was it not to spur that economic that development?
So Latif, it was not for 7 years. It was for in the last financial year. That's when they received that amount of money.
All right.
Previously, they received less. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I ask myself the question. So if you give Mandera 1.9 billion shillings or Kitui 432 million Kenya shillings, counties which we have no dispute that they have been marginalized. If you give those counties those monies for 1 year or 2 years, are you saying that you've given them too much? Now you should stop. You brought them at par with Kiambu and Nyeri and other developed counties.
But
really?
Senator, is it really 1 year or 2 years? Have the previous two formulas not been working to the advantage of these counties?
No, but you know that and I'm very happy that we're having this conversation, Latif. You know, there is something that is coming out. People are not being told that the basis of the disagreement among senators is actually necessarily not the sharing of the money per se. The challenge is how much money is being shared out. You know, progressively, the Senate under the Division of Revenue Bill, we should progressively get more money to counties.
Yep.
But now what happened in the last financial year is that the Division of Revenue gave us the same amount of money as was given in the previous financial year.
Yep.
That is 316.5 billion Kenya shillings. Mm-hmm. So you have a small cake or a constant cake that you are supposed to share equitably among 47 children. Then you decide, for whatever reason, last time you got 2 million Kenya shillings. This time you will get 1 million Kenya shillings. And yet the amount of money that you're sharing is the same. You know what? You're not Latif. If the national government gave 340 billion Kenya shillings minimum, we will not be having this conversation.
But Senator Wambua, is this not under the assumption that any money that had been given in the past, then there are certain things that would have been done with it? And so in the next allocation of resources, the assumption is that it would be then going towards something else.
Sure. I mean, that's not mutually exclusive from what we are discussing. We are just saying that, and by the way, make no mistake about this. Devolution has brought changes in areas where the national government, the central government, would never have done as much as we have done with devolution. Mm-hmm. So if a road was done in Wajir, I can tell you that the first tarmac road in Wajir was done under devolution.
Yes, and you wouldn't
Now,
require
if-
it to
if
be
you
done
take away-
again from scratch. Maybe what you were looking at was then maintenance or repair, right?
My dear, there's not only one road in Wajir.
It's an
Many roads.
example. It's an example that you can use to point to
Yes.
something else.
That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, because you've done one road in Wajir, which is X number of kilometers, you need to do a lot more because there was none. So you don't stop because you don't say, we gave you 1.5 whatever billion. You did this road, and you know what? That's it. No, you can't do that.
But so Senator, for how long should this formula remain unchanged? Because it sounds to me that anytime this formula tries to change the parameters, and those parameters now appear to disadvantage those counties that will call themselves marginalized, it'll always be resisted.
No, not necessarily. I told you the challenge that we are dealing with. In fact, at another forum last week, I said, perhaps actually the Senate is fighting a battle that does not belong to it. This battle belongs to the Treasury. These are the people who are supposed to be giving us money to cushion. If you look at the formula that was proposed by the CRA, that formula took note of the fact that because of changing parameters, counties will lose some money, other counties will gain a lot of money. So KRA, in their wisdom, they said, okay, for counties that are losing money, the Treasury should create a cushion fund. So that if counties are losing, then they are cushioned to the extent of the loss. And that made a lot of sense. You counties have already done their budgets. They have even passed the appropriation bills. So how do you tell them now, after you pass your budget, you've done your appropriation, you have accessed IFMIS, thinking that you will get 10 billion Kenya shillings, now you have to readjust, you're going to get 7 billion. How do you deal with that?
Just tell them to do that. I mean, they haven't.
No, it will not.
They haven't.
It will
started
not fly
spending this
because.
money.
But they have already committed. They have already committed, and there are things like recurrent. They have already spent money on recurrent. So how you recover that?
So you mentioned something like the Treasury should have come up with a cushion fund.
Yes.
In what form or shape would this fund be? What would it be called?
It's just that.
And
it's a cushion fund.
Does it not negate the whole purpose of having a formula? If you have a formula that is saying that this is how we shall distribute the money, and then the national government comes again and cushions, what's the point?
Let's understand this. First of all, we should, and not just us, all of us in this country, now must move this conversation beyond just a formula. Because you see, the wrong impression, again, we are creating in this conversation is that this formula has happened on us from the moon. It's something we cannot touch. These formulas are done by people. So the cushion fund would be inbuilt into the formula. And you ask me how long would this formula last? Constitutionally, we should have passed the third generation formula by June that year.
Yep.
The last two formulas, they have elapsed. But let me tell you something very interesting, and this is also something that people are not being told. In India, when they realized that there was a serious problem in the sharing of their revenue among their regions, they reverted to the formula that they were using in 1971. To date, hello?
Yep.
Yes.
To date, they are using that formula. So there is nothing that stops us as the Senate of the Republic of Kenya through a resolution to adopt the second generation formula
and make it
use it as the third generation formula. Nothing stops us from doing that.
But Senator, if we were to look at India as an example, India is becoming more and more nationalistic, and it has policies that are marginalizing more and more its Muslim population. But that's not what I wanted to ask you. What I wanted to ask was this. If we look at the monies that have been disbursed to the counties over the years, would you say that those monies have actually been utilized for the purpose that they were intended for? Well,
my answer to you would be, today I have a problem in my county on the management of public funds. That should never stop anyone from giving money to counties, because that money does not belong to the managers of the funds. That money belongs to the people of Kitui County. And if there's a problem with the management of the funds, then deal with the person who is mismanaging the funds.
But have they been managed properly, Senator? That's the question, I think. Have they really been managed properly?
In most cases, not. In most cases, not.
But would you say that that is what then gives the impression that the monies that are being given to the counties are not sufficient?
So are you saying then, because our debate is about the formula, then are we saying that the counties that we are supposed to be getting money away from are being so mismanaged, and the counties that we are giving more money are being so well managed? Is that the argument?
No. That would be simplifying it a little too much.
No. There's no simplification. It's the same thing with...
No, it is simplifying it, Senator.
There is corruption in the national government, isn't there?
You see, I'm bringing in the topic of accountability vis-a-vis the monies that have been disbursed by the national government. That's really what I'm trying to ask. And
that's exactly what I said. I said, in my own county, in fact, there is a pending impeachment process over mismanagement of county resources. That money does not belong to the governor. That money belongs to the people of Kitui. And if it is mismanaged, then we must demand accountability. We don't say that we don't give people money because the governor has mismanaged the funds. No.
I actually agree with you.
We're punishing those people twice.
I agree with you. You don't say that. But you cannot also not neglect it, because the image that we have whenever we hear this argument of money being taken or given, or money being denied or given, is that there isn't much happening in the counties. And I'm trying to say that given what has been received, surely shouldn't the counties have seen more for what they have received? That's really what I'm saying.
They should have seen more, but they have seen quite something. That I can tell you for sure. It is me who said that the first time I could...
Senator?
It is me who say all the time that devolution has created a lot of millionaires in the counties. People who are just working with counties. They are doing their supplies, they are doing their roads, they are doing their contracts. Devolution has changed lives in the counties. There is one thing you can never take away from Kenyans, even if you are going to do a referendum or anything. You can never take away devolution from them.
That's true. Let's talk about Kitui as we conclude the conversation for the next about 1 minute. What is it that's happening in Kitui and what's the way forward?
Latif, I lost you a bit.
About Kitui.
Sorry, and
the move by the MCA is to impeach the governor of Kitui County. That flopped last week. What is it that was happening and what's the way forward now?
Well, I'm not really sure about flopped. I'm very sure that the process did not begin. What I am advised happened is that some members of the county assembly disappeared. Only them can say how that happened. And so I think the majority leader, who was the owner of the motion, chose not to table it on the day that he was supposed to. I think what he did was just a tactical retreat. I have spoken to him. He has advised me that in the fullness of time, he will be tabling the motion.
Okay. I think we'll have a longer conversation on the goings on, the devolution in Kitui County some other time. We understand that you're heading into a meeting this morning to discuss more about this formula and other works of the Senate. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Senator Enoch Wambua of Kitui County.
Thanks, Eric. It was a pleasure speaking to you this morning.
Asante sana. Have a good day.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless
Thank
you.
you.
It's the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. We're taking a quick break at 5 minutes to 8 o'clock. Remember, the show is broadcasting on terrestrial. It's also online, www.spicefm.co.ke and SpiceFM KE on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. It's also live streaming and broadcasting on KTN Home. We'll be back shortly. Good morning. At 3 minutes to 8 o'clock, it's a situation room. The conversation continues. Just listening to the senator, just from the very beginning by saying we are going to lose a lot of money. And all the senators who are complaining, I mean, they're going to lose a lot of money. It clearly means that nobody is willing to cede ground.
You know, if only I could believe that the concerns were altruistic.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I do not. Because we are discussing politicians and the deliberations that politicians are having about their respective counties. And the understanding that very many of these senators want to be governors.
You know what would make me truly happy is that with all of this debate and these deliberations, if we had somebody saying, you know what, last time I was able to do this, that, the other thing. Just an example of when I'm bringing this forward. And this is what is hanging in the balance. I have a hospital that cannot be completed. I have a number of outfits that I'm trying to put in place. We started the show talking about some of the things that have been done in Laikipia, for example, with the innovations, with the vehicles, etc., etc. I have a project like that that's on ground for you to understand that I may have vast geographical space, but there's something that I'm trying to do for the people. And I have these things pending. Right? It would be nice to hear things like that and say, this is the reason then why I require more. Not to give a blanket statement that, yeah, well, you know, a lot has been done. We expect and hope that more will be done. No. I think it's necessary at this point to give it some life, give it some meaning, give it something that people will be able to understand and say, okay,
put a project to the money.
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually what we're dealing with. And, you know, we often say, well, yeah, politicians would never do something like that. Well, I think it's about time you have to call them and say, you know what? It is necessary that you actually tell people
they can, and
this
they
is
would
actually what is
If we
going
looked at
on.
their development programs, and if they went down and started auditing and saying, this is what our CIDP was saying that we wanted to do within 5 years.
And this is what our plan is for next year.
And this is why we presented a budget to the county assembly seeking extra funds and extra authority to dip into the funds so that we can continue this project. They would do that. The point is, however, that this is one side of a country, and then there's another side of the country that's feeling, I could have done more had I received a bit more.
Okay, but with the one that you had, the question is then, with the
What
one
have
that
you
you
done?
had, what have you done?
You know, that is a question that no one wants
Nobody
to
wants to answer.
respond to directly.
Yeah.
Because what is obvious is that Kenyans have seen monies going to the areas they come from, money that the areas have never, ever, ever, ever received.
Anyway,
Yeah.
we're coming to the top of the hour. Let's take a pause in this conversation and then take a look at traffic. Good morning. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting on Spice FM and KTN Home as well as online. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock.
All right, Thika Road has a little bit of drama this morning. An accident right around Juja there on Kimber Road. And this has meant a vehicle has knocked yet another. So that's causing a holdup in that area. The Utali Muthaiga stretch this morning is a nightmare. It's bumper to bumper all the way as far back as Safari Park Hotel and then joining with Muthaiga Corner, as I like to call it. So that's a bit of a mess this morning. Mombasa Road is serving up the Manic Monday, and that's right all the way from the Weybridge at Mlolongo, and that heads all the way to Cabanas, moving and inching along ever so slowly this morning. So you're going to have to approach with caution. Let's look a little bit outside of the Nairobi metropolis. The fog is quite low in areas Limuru, and so that means that visibility has been affected. So please need to be careful in those areas. Coming into the city, though, from Limuru Road, past the village market and into the CBD, it's quite slow this morning, so be ready to apply some patience as you're moving about. Apart from that, nothing major standing out at us this morning. If it does change, we'll let you know. We're right in the middle of traffic hour for a Monday morning. Doesn't look too bad. Likely to get a little bit more chock blocked, but do let us know what you see. Spice FM KE, that's how you can reach us on Twitter, and let's keep it moving.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating
2.5
insights about the state of the nation.
Kenya's biggest
This is
conversation in the room. We have CT Muga, Eric Latif, Nduoko. We are also streaming the show live on KTN Home. CT Muga, today's proverb, please.
There is always a winner, even in a monkey beauty contest. From a human perspective. See, the monkeys would have a totally different story to tell. But when people who...
Why would their story be different? It's their beauty contest and they can see a winner.
They don't see themselves as we do. As we see them, rather.
Right.
I'm sure they probably see us as we see them and they think, what strange creatures that we have on
What
this
is
planet.
this?
Really strange people.
Yeah. What?
Huge, clumsy, can't even climb trees. Can't even hang on a branch. A branch.
Really?
Just a branch. I mean,
Something
come
as
on.
And look, the worst thing, they don't even have tails. What sort of
Surely.
people are these?
Different perspectives.
Yes.
Let's take a different perspective of things. So the country has been reopened. Now we're seeing a rising number of cases being announced by the government on a daily basis. This weekend we've hit the 600 figure, 688, 600, and and the percentage of the samples tested and those that turn out positive is also rising.
Yeah.
The number of people who are getting hospitalized with COVID-19 is also rising. Increasingly, you're getting to a point where people get to know somebody who has tested positive for COVID-19, as opposed to 2 months ago when people would ask, but have you had this thing?
Right.
Where is this COVID? Brings in the question to when the president listened to those that advised him and said, you know what, there's a lot of economic pressure and there's social pressure and people feel like they want to go back into some relaxation of some of these measures that we have been putting in place, allow people to travel out of the Nairobi metropolitan area and Mombasa, allow the people to travel across the country, allow for PSVs to continue operating, but keep advising the people to observe the measures. Because that's the thing that people have to remember, that the government did not say, we are now allowing people not to wear masks. We are now allowing people not to wash their hands. We are not allowing people not to cough into their elbow. Those still remain the basics. Where is the disconnect between what the government is saying and what the people are doing?
I mean, there's a huge disconnect because it's clear that people just, I don't know if it's a flagrant disobedience of what the government has said, or it's just their own reality. People's reality is totally different than from what government has laid out, or what you can see actually playing out around the world. People are dying. More and more people are getting sick. Even after people have gotten sick and recovered, they're still dealing with lingering issues having to do with having contracted the disease. But what we are seeing is that people seem to be welcoming COVID and saying, "Here I am, come and infect me." Because the behavior that we see is that people are out and about as if there's not an issue. I'm not even just talking about going and doing your trade every day and coming home. I'm talking about people becoming more and more social. People are doing things that we've been told will increase your likelihood of contracting COVID. People are out, enjoying themselves in social functions, social affairs, a restaurant here, a party here. It's as if there is nothing that has happened. But at the same time, which would defeat logic, at the same time you see that the people through which, or as contact tracing is done, the people through which you're being infected are most likely the people that you're frolicking with in these places where you are going. Mm-hmm. So I would ask myself, so why is there not this understanding or comprehension that, you know what, for a while, because the things that we said before still remain true. This virus doesn't move. We move it.
It's the people that move
It's the people that move it. So the more and more we find ourselves, mixing about with one another, it becomes a giant petri dish through which COVID continues to thrive.
Is there a difference in people's behavior between now and March 15th?
That's the thing. It has not changed. People still want to do the same things that they were doing without realizing that times have changed and you cannot operate in the same way if you don't want to get sick. It's very simple. You don't want to get sick, you do the things that you're being asked not to do. If you continue
to treat this disease normally.
You know, at the heart of it, there is a religion that many of our people actually practice without knowing that they're practicing it. It's called fatalism. A fundamental and intrinsic belief that something is going to happen is predestined, and it doesn't really matter what you do. The outcome will be the same. Die. So why should I even worry too much about it? And when you think along those lines, it means that any small effort you feel, but see, I've tried. See, I've worn the mask once a week. So that in your mind measures as you having made an effort. But I think what perhaps exacerbates this more is when you are unable to focus into the following day, not into the distant future, how you are going to eat, what you will do in order to enable you to even survive, then anything else that goes beyond that becomes immaterial for you completely. Now, the unfortunate thing is that there are very many Kenyans who've been tottering on this very precipice that I've just mentioned, where they don't know. They actually have no clue. Because the clue had to do with work that they did, part-time jobs, jengo as we call it, doing this and the other. Now, when there's no certainty about that, then it means there's no certainty for tomorrow and there's no certainty for them. So it is really very easy to succumb and say, you know something, why am I worrying about whether I will fall sick or not? How is that important to me? It's the same thinking that even when we did not have COVID, you will find someone actually postponing treatment, because in the priority of things that unless they feel they're about to become an ancestor and go to the next world, the likelihood they will say no, there are more important things to do. I will self-medicate.
But is this the same behavior that we exhibit with other risks? Why don't you just cross the road? Do you see people just getting to a road and just crossing without looking left, right?
The reason why they don't is because being hit by a car, the consequences are immediate and real. Illnesses, by their very nature, don't hit you every day.
They give you a little bit of time.
They give you space, and there's always room for you to maneuver.
Okay, but don't we see people taking an effort to fight malaria, for instance, and avoid malaria?
No, I don't. That's the thing. Malaria wouldn't be what it is. People take precautions when there's an effort by the government or agencies that deal with malaria to try and help them prevent malaria. And fine, they may be mosquito coils, they may have all sorts of things to try and net, what have you. But the vast majority of people just go about their business believing that if you get malaria, you can be cured. So what's the big deal? The fact that there's a cure makes people feel, well, you know.
I also think that
I'll take medication, and they know something called malaria queen. I'll take it.
I also think that the optics that something like COVID presents are not as blatant as a road accident, for example, or as you crossing the road and a vehicle is coming for you. You can imagine your brains being splattered on the road. You're probably going to want to wait a little minute, but because you cannot see COVID immediately, because even if you may have contracted it today, me being in close proximity with you, the chances that you'll start to feel sick are maybe not for a few days. The chances are that you would not feel anything whatsoever because of what because of what we know right now. You can imagine what that does on someone's psyche. Yeah, well, I know that I'm in the presence of Eric, and I know that because he's a responsible individual, he's taking precautions. I've taken precautions. So if we're in the same space, we will be fine. And I think that has really played on the psyche of people to say that, okay, because it's not something that we can see.
Because like you haven't seen it yet.
Exactly. Because you have not seen it like this, or because it has not hit home. Look,
and even if you've seen it, you haven't seen enough of it.
So
if it's something passing, you don't really take too much notice of it.
Right? I'll give you another example. When you had a disease like Ebola, the people who were seeing it on a daily basis, where you saw people hemorrhaging within hours.
But
right?
Ebola is back, just so that you understand.
It's just here at DRC.
Yeah, it's come back.
The people who are seeing it like seeing them face to face would have behaved in a different manner than the people who are across the pond, who really didn't have an idea, but they thought, all right, it could cross the border maybe at some point. But they were not really feeling it to the point that somebody else was. The same thing today. The person who has gotten COVID is likely to be a lot more careful than the individual who's frolicking about, having a drink here or there, sitting in the company of very many people, because they realize the dangers that have been posed by it by virtue of them having contracted the virus. It just means that behavior is different based on your experience. And what we're trying to say is that, as CT says all the time, this virus is not democratic. It will not come and ask you, oh, okay, today I won't come because I see that, all right, you thought a thing or no. That's the danger that lurks. And the infection rate is much higher, the effect, and it's much quicker. The depth is much deeper. That is the thing. Unfortunately, because it's like faith, because you can't see it, then maybe it doesn't or does exist. And this is what we're saying. More and more people are dying. More and more people are being infected. Just look at the numbers. More and more people are suffering as a result of this thing. Precaution will not be taken because people don't see it. Even the way people operate on social media. Look at it. They will say something today, all right, oh, this COVID, when it is somebody that they know or somebody within their family, the narrative changes. Oh, you guys, COVID is real. Let's be careful and avoid social, and let's practice social distancing. Why does it then suddenly change? Because it comes closer to home, the narrative changes.
So as a social scientist, CT, this is normal behavior by human beings?
Yes.
So how then do you get to convince them that what you consider a distant danger is actually lurking just around you, so that you can change your behavior?
You've taken us to the realm of behavior change intervention.
Yeah.
You can't change the way someone behaves if you don't change the way they think. Because it's our thinking that determines our behavior, really, if you look at it. And remember, we'll talk about socialization, how they influence, parental influence, blah, 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 peer influence. The truth of the matter is this, if you have been brought up in a society where communal thinking is encouraged, meaning norms are accepted without examining them and questioning and saying, okay, this is what we need to do, but must we necessarily, for instance, just do it this way, or can we do it differently? Just questioning it, meaning determining for yourself. If your thinking or your bringing doesn't encourage you to think that way, you will be in that little vortex where you never really move out of what it is that you have been accustomed to. It doesn't even occur to you to. Remember, there are terms like herd mentality. People doing things because other people are doing it.
Yeah.
But more so when it is within your peers. That's why you talk about peer influence. It's the same thing. When you hear, for instance, that there is a disease that seems to be a danger. Remember, we keep being told that if you're over 60 years of age and that aside, that's number one. If you have a pre-existing condition like, say, your blood pressure, high blood pressure, or diabetes, man, you're in danger. We even had figures the other day. 18 plus 14, it puts you at 32% if you have both. Now, somebody who is 30, they look at that, they say, but you know me,
I don't have any of these things, so I can go out and
I'm not over 60, I don't have diabetes, I don't have hypertension. What is my problem really? I don't have this problem. And then we have a situation where the vast majority of people in this country are probably below the age of 35. So they cannot look at this thing in the same way as I would. They wouldn't. Because they would consider and say, but all the things I have read doesn't put me in that bracket of people who are endangered. So,
and if you look at it critically, can you really blame such an individual from thinking that way? Can you?
No, I mean,
exactly, you can't, because if
already
these are
told
the
me
things that have been prescribed.
This and the other. I don't fit in any of those categories.
I don't fit in those categories. I don't ascribe to some of the things that they do, so I can then go ahead and do whatever I want.
Church, so the likelihood, but they forget they go probably go to a bar,
right,
where there's even closer proximity than they would in a church. All these things lend themselves to giving someone a certain mindset. And that mindset is what we are now seeing in operation. We're actually seeing it being actualized. All this behavior. And by the way, this isn't a comfort. But everywhere around the world, it's something very similar. So it's not as though Kenyans have taken the cup for this one.
No.
It's global.
It's actually some of the things that are happening in some parts of the world, you read, you say, goodness gracious me. Then you realize, no, this is human nature.
And here you go with traditional behavior and human nature then being a breeding ground for death with COVID.
No, guarantee. Actually, it's not even just death. It's inviting it.
Yeah.
You're beckoning it. You're moving towards it. And if it isn't close enough, you want to move even closer to it.
Yeah.
So people will not make decisions that are in their best interest.
They rarely do.
In this particular case, for example.
Oddly enough, they rarely do. A disease like COVID, when you can find so many reasons, extenuous circumstances that you can actually bring to bear on the situation, it competes with your taking this disease seriously. Remember, the age factor that I mentioned is 1, an absence of pre-existing condition is 2, but then again, even the experiential aspect of it. How many people do you know who've lived the experience of having COVID? That one, it competes with the seriousness of the disease almost instantly.
Yeah.
It wasn't any different with HIV, by the way. Okay? Where you'd find someone telling you, okay, you've been using protection, yes. Okay? How long? We used it for a week. And then, see, this person looks okay. Say, ooh, no. Okay. Hey, looks okay. Have you gone for a test? No.
But they look fine.
They look fine.
But we've been together now this is the second week, so we should be fine. Now, what you're hearing is how that person thinks, and everything you told them about the disease, believe me, did not take root. What they've believed, there was a definite pause when they thought this thing is dangerous. And for them, 1 week later, they're not suffering, there's nothing wrong, no.
We're okay.
Then you tell yourself something. Why do you think it is, for instance, that people take risks? Do you think that people who take risks sit and calculate it seriously? No, they actually don't.
It's fly by your seat of the pants, just jump into the thing
and
as
a
you
certain
go.
feeling of invincibility. Look at it this way. Who are the people who are most likely to take risks? Someone who's younger or someone who's older?
Someone who's younger for sure.
Yes, exactly.
Because you've had less time for calculation.
Yes, and also when you're older, you've seen enough to inform you that there are certain things you best leave undone.
Yeah.
When you're younger, you see, why not?
The experiential bit.
Yes, exactly. So if you're talking about COVID, the fact that the whole world has it, that can also be numbing. Because you feel, so it's not specific to us. Oh, okay. So how does this relate to me? The way we understand things, believe me, you can go around in as many circles as you like, but it'll always boil down to me. This thing that I'm hearing and seeing, how is it going to affect me?
Me as a person.
Yes. And how does it compete with other things that my life already has? And these things that are occupying my life, like possible hunger, possible other diseases that I'm more familiar with, so my children's school fees, well-being. Man, that disease doesn't feature on the list of 1 to 10. It goes
But at the same
back.
time, where do you draw this line between this personal behavior and personal belief? So this person believes that, they're invincible. They're not going to get COVID. And that's why they're exposing themselves. They're walking without a mask on. They are, they're not shaking hands, but they're coming into close proximity with everybody else, not really focusing on maintaining social distance. But this is the same person. If you told them that, so-and-so, your neighbor has tested positive for COVID, they will react immediately. They'll want that neighbor out of the neighborhood.
Which tells you that all along, it's not that they haven't understood, they just haven't prioritized it.
So it becomes a priority when it gets closer.
But you can see it's next door.
Yeah. The thing, the
How
proximity weighs
much can a
heavily.
priority become a priority? It's next door.
Yeah, proximity weighs heavily on your priority because the closer it gets to you, that's when you look at the narrative that changes when people even write about it or express things about it. When we use social media as an example, there's COVID out there, it's out there. That's fine. But when it
People
is
be careful out there.
be careful out
This
there,
COVID
guys.
is real.
But when it is somebody that you know, or somebody who is just across from you, the narrative changes. Everybody, please. It becomes now a personal call.
And it's a plea now.
It's an appeal now. Please, guys, be very careful. This thing, it's real. It's killing people. I was at the burial of someone, So, and that's what we're saying. It shouldn't have to get to that point before you choose to do something about it. In this case, there's something that you're being asked to do about it is not major. It's not some earth-shattering, life-changing thing that you're being asked to do, right? Basic. Because the truth of the matter is that this thing is not forever. Or it could be that we come to live with it and we're able to then understand what you need to do to survive with this thing in our environment. But for at this time, where infection rates are very high, where people are dying, where we're still running after the virus, then it begs that people would actually take a little bit of responsibility for priority and say, okay, masks up, I can. Maintain social distance, I can. Keep hygiene levels up, I can. It's actually things that you can do. This is the problem.
I mean, you ask yourself, look at the social liberties that people enjoy in the West, and which in and of themselves are wonderful things. And I now want to juxtapose it with the absence, as the West tells, of social liberties in, say, a place like China.
Mm-hmm.
They have an absence of social liberties, but they're staying alive. Because the government has decided that we're making this decision for you.
I wanted actually to bring that conversation to that point. Is it for governments to make those decisions for people? Because clearly, as we've established, people are not gonna.
No.
They will not internalize. They will not take the effort.
They won't prioritize.
They will not prioritize
That's
this
really
thing,
it.
right? So you see that everybody is doing whatever they want to do. They can hear the numbers are rising. They're like, oh, okay, 600. Okay, as long as those you don't know any one of the 600, you still continue living. And even when you know one of the 600, if it's twice removed, you still will continue behaving. I mean, I know a friend of a friend who got, that is far, until it gets closer home.
Well,
is it about time that the government takes control?
Well, isn't it interesting that you can make a correlation then between those nations on the globe who essentially have taken a responsibility for their citizens and then having been able to tell their citizens, you know what? Let's operate in this manner. And these individuals actually listen to them. Look at the more liberal societies like Sweden, for example. It's in their constitution that you cannot actually force people to do a certain thing. So what did they do? They made a suggestion to the people that, you know what, actually, guys, COVID is here. This is what we suggest as a government that you should actually do to take care of yourselves. And people fell in line. Why do you think they did that? Because historically, a government has already proven that they're able to, one, take care of you. They're able to take responsibility and make sure that the things that they said they would do as per governance and leadership, they actually do. That's one. Look at China, whereby they decided, forcefully or however you want to call it, that they're going to take control of the reins of the country and put certain things in order. They put the country back together in 30 years. They don't want to see things going south. So they are going to say, this is what we are going to do. Why didn't people step out of line? Because they have seen, again, historically, that what the government said they were going to do, they do. Don't you think it's easier then for people to listen to governments who actually have a history of getting things done?
No, there's something I need to mention here. Remember, in that period of time, the Chinese elevated from poverty over 300 million people.
There you go. In 30 years. Meanwhile, we keep talking about the fact that China is still in the midst of their 12 5-year plans. They're in the second to last one as we speak. So we can look at them and think they've developed, they've done everything, but they're not even done yet.
No, they're not.
And in the midst of that, they can still tell people, guess what? This is what we want to do. This is how we intend to do it. And the people listen.
We want to open up this conversation now for you to join in 0719-012-600. And also, you can comment on our social media handles, Spice FM KE on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting on Spice FM and KTN Home. The conversation this morning is, what is it that we need to do to see people falling in line and observing the measures that have been advised, not just by the Kenyan government, but the World Health Organization on how to avoid COVID-19. Good morning, 26 minutes after 8.
All right, let's look at how things may have changed. Still overcast in Nairobi at 13 degrees. Those cloudy conditions are likely to follow for most parts of the day, seeing a high of 21 and lows of 11. In Nyeri, it's cloudy at 13 degrees. There will be showers later with highs of 19 and lows of 12. Nakuru with partly cloudy conditions at 13. We'll see highs of 21 and lows of 13 with showers later on in the afternoon. Eldoret is mostly cloudy at 13 degrees and there's a fog over the town. We'll see thunderstorms later with highs of 19 and lows of 12. Kisumu is mostly sunny at 18 degrees. We'll see highs of 27 and lows of 18 today, with showers expected through most parts of the afternoon. Kakamega follows in fine form with showers later, highs of 24 and lows of 16. Currently partly cloudy conditions at 17 degrees. Malindi at 25 degrees is partly cloudy. We'll see highs of 28 and lows of 24. Let's take a look at Mombasa, where it's partly cloudy at 23 degrees, highs of 28 and lows of 22. It's partly cloudy in Kampala at 18 degrees. We'll see highs of 26 and lows of 18 through the day. 22 degrees and partly cloudy in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, highs of 29 and lows of 21. In Joburg, where it's clear skies at 6 degrees, we'll see highs of 20 and a chilly low of 3. And finally, for now, in Lagos at 24 degrees, it's clear skies. It'll change later though with a sprinkle later, highs of 28 and lows of 23. How have things changed on the roads this morning? We're looking at Mombasa Road and it's still going to be quite a chunky affair this morning, headed all the way from the SGR. It's loosened up just a little bit, heading from the SGR towards town as you get to the Nyayo Stadium roundabout. However, you'll be on Uhuru Highway for a while, getting yourself through towards the CBD or then out through Westlands. It'll take some time to get out of there. Ngong Road is enjoying a smooth operation this morning. It's not too bad. And looking at Thika Road, coming out from the Utali Drift and then headed towards Muthaiga and then out from Kiambu Road and then into the CBD, it looks like it's A-OK. We don't have much of an issue outside of the city. Looking into Mombasa today and then also looking into Kisumu, we don't have much issues there. It's a Monday morning. Things are still picking up just a tad. All right, let us know what you see. Spice FMKE. That's how you can reach us on Twitter. For now, it doesn't look too terrible. We'll see what it looks like in a short while, but for now, you should be fine.
Welcome back. This is The Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting from Nairobi to Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri, Malindi, on radio and also on KTN Home and also on www.spicefm.co.ke. In the room this morning, Eric Latin, Uduopo and CT Muga. We are discussing COVID-19, people's behavior, especially Kenyans. And we're asking what needs to change for people to start seeing the COVID-19 change. Let's go to the phone line. Get very many people calling right now. Vincent in Rongai, good morning.
Good morning to you. I really like your show. I'd like to contribute something.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, there's something that CT said about the human nature.
Yes.
Actually, let me tell you, the human nature is intelligent. It is not stupid. We human beings are the ones who are stupid. Actually, yesterday I saw people. I live in Rongai.
Mm-hmm.
And I was walking around, and bars were open at around 11.
Mm-hmm.
And there were so many people in the bars, and there was nothing like social distancing. Actually, you shouldn't call it social distancing. There was nothing like physical distancing.
At all?
It is easy at all. It is easy for us to socially distance ourselves, but physically, that is where the problem lies.
So what needs to change, Vincent?
It is the mindset, individual mindset. You know, we have this thing we call hard thinking. Yeah, tunafikiria tu kama, you know, like ng'ombe wakiwa pamoja, they think as a group. they don't think as individuals. So it is an individual responsibility.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Patrick in Vihiga, good morning.
Yes, good morning. How are you?
We're fine, thank you.
Yeah, I'm impressed by this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
My take is this.
Yes.
Old habits die hard. And the new habits die very fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm in an environment in the interior of Vihiga. Where we have about 300 people or to 700 people during a market day.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody listens to the minister's appeals every day. And it is like it is only the minister and the media who are fighting this war.
So what is it
Kenyans don't bother about it.
What do people say
Yes.
when people are milling around, not observing any of these measures? What is it that they are saying about COVID?
This thing is not there. According to them, they feel it is a question of the government to get money.
Till now?
Yes. Just as we have never trusted our politicians, our people are not serious.
Okay, Patrick.
They don't think this thing is really.
Wow.
It's very worrying. Yeah.
Indeed it is. Mike in Kisumu, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing in the studio today?
We're well, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love your topic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm calling from Kisumu.
Yeah.
Actually, what we need to do is we should get out of this topic of thinking about me, myself, and I. You know, it should reach a point where we know that I can create a chain of up to 1,000 and 10,000 people of getting COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Because once I get it, it say the symptoms start appearing within 14 days.
Mm-hmm.
But when I get it, in these 14 days, how many people do I get into contact with if I don't follow the guidelines of the Ministry of Health?
Many.
You know, it will mean the first person I meet, that's the first chain, because the person is going to meet another person, is going to meet another person. So once we stop thinking about ourselves and being self-centered,
Mm-hmm.
that is the only way we can stop creating this chain of COVID, and how we can prevent it from spreading further, you know, by following the right guidelines that the Ministry of Health is putting in place.
So, Mike, in Kisumu, what is it that you're doing? Seeing everybody else behaving normally, what are you doing to
Number
avoid?
one, I make sure that I have my mask on each and every time.
Mm-hmm.
I wash my hands. I walk with the sanitizer in my pocket at all times.
Okay.
If I'm leaving.
And what should somebody who can't afford a sanitizer do?
Actually, actually the behaviors are changing. People to behave normally. Like the places, the shops where water was every day. Now you find some people have stopped putting in water cans out of the shop.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it's proving to be a challenge.
So people
But I'm
should
also
continue their
business
vigilance.
Yeah, I'm also a businessman. I make sure that I have my water point at my shop at every time. Every time before I open the door and arrange my things, I make sure that I have a water can stay there with the soap
Yeah.
for people to use.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mike.
Yeah, welcome.
Solomon in Mombasa.
Good morning.
Good
to you.
morning.
In Kenya, we are saying social distancing is staying with people who you know.
Mm-hmm.
So the ones that you don't know, that's when you're wearing masks and sanitizing. So it's been a challenge, even for myself, by the.
Mm.
So you find when you're close buddies and relatives, so you avoid the social. You don't even see the need of putting a mask.
Without even knowing where your close relatives or friends could have been before they meet you.
Yeah.
That's a danger,
Exactly.
though, isn't it?
Yes. Then even I had a quarrel with my wife regarding the same, and he told me just count how many people do you interact before the day ends. Especially you work with I work in an institution where public people come in the office every now and then. So when you're in the elevator, so you count that much around, not less than 100 people
Yeah, many.
that you talk to. So if, for example, I test positive, maybe 14 days, that will be almost 1,000 people have get contact with.
True. Masiga in Chuka, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
How are you? How is
Hello?
Chuka this morning?
Chuka is cool.
All right. How are people behaving in Chuka with regards to COVID-19?
There's social distance, yes, but with those who really mind, they should be keeping the distance. And then I should say I blame the government in some way. The government is doing this thing at a point in distance. You know, with all these things, Kumar bringing all those contributions and other people bringing the contributions, and then the next morning you hear the whatever has been donated is being stolen. Or I mean, as a normal person, as a normal mwananchi wa chini kabisa, I really feel like the government is not serious.
And so, therefore, you also will not be serious.
Yeah, the perception is that.
Okay.
If I don't now, a good example is Sakaja. Really, for sure, where are we heading?
So if those in leadership are not leading by example, then basically everybody else feels like there could be something that we are not being told.
Not exactly, but let us look at it this way. There are some people who really believe in the Viongozis.
Yep.
And whatever the Kiongozi does is what he will do. So it gives a very big challenge on, even if you are told as a volunteer to go and spread the news about COVID, you won't do it comfortably.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Masiga. And have a good day in Chuka. Well, what is it that you hear people saying?
Well, I mean, just this last comment of saying that, you know, if that's the thing, I think, unfortunately, without realizing that as much as there's government responsibility, there's personal responsibility, because guess what? When you get sick, it's not the government, it is you. So the responsibility that we also have to apply as individuals is actually quite high, and it's actually quite great. There are certain things that they can put in place. You want to talk about stimulus package, you want to talk about all this. However, there is something that we can actually do. In this case, there is something that we can actually do. And the onus then is on us to make sure that we are actually following.
But there's a level of trust. I mean, if the government, the one that has come with this information, is not behaving the way it's telling you to behave,
does that give you then does that open the door then for you to say, all right, since they're not doing what they should do, I'm just going to live then as I like?
Especially because you have not seen this COVID in your neighborhood.
You know this.
So you still have that feeling of, well, this thing is so distant. And the person who's telling a teacher, Mwalimu, if you went to school and you were telling students, I want you to be wearing shoes every morning, and then you're going to school, to classroom in slippers, you think the students will follow that? They'll be looking at you
your shirts.
Tucking your shirts, and you don't tuck in your shirt yourself. It's the same thing.
Comb your hair.
No wonder you quit.
That's why.
Now, I'm actually talking about the things that we normally tell children.
Yes.
We get it. We get it. Okay.
Yes. There's a certain sense of accountability that we don't have. And you may say that examples don't count or they don't influence, but they do. Even as we say that people do their own thing, the truth of the matter is people want to actually listen to their leaders. And by and large, they tend to listen to their leaders. But all you see from very many leaders is impunity. You gave a very good example of countries where, yes, there's lots of freedom, individual freedoms, but they listen to what their governments say. And it's very simple. These people are accountable, and so they're trustworthy. So they say something, you don't even think twice. Okay, you may think, but you figure, no, they must know what they're saying. If it's the government saying it, then you'll do it. You're talking about the national government before devolution. The people who have made the situation worse are the devolved governments. You know, national government was far away. Nairobi. So unless you're in Nairobi, it's far, and everything could be blamed to Nairobi.
And unless the DC's Land Rover came to your village.
Yes.
But
you also hear me listens to what is mentioned in Nairobi.
Yeah.
Now, you have a situation where you know this government is actually here. And what do you see? The senator told us about how it is that county money has made people millionaires. The issue is that the issue isn't that they've been made millionaires, is have they actually delivered what they were supposed to deliver? Being millionaires is fine. If you're making money by doing the right thing, it is fine. But this isn't the case. Because if that were the case, these issues that keep dogging counties about the health of the citizenry, taking care of the elderly, taking care of the infirm, these things would not arise. And if they arose, they would be at a minimum. They are not at a minimum.
There wouldn't be an issue.
No, but right now it's an issue. Even the issue of ensuring that there's sufficient bed space for people who are sick is an issue.
So basically what you're bringing down to is the government does not have social capital with the people. So the government is the one that is selling this story of let's avoid COVID-19, and the people are looking at it and not believing.
Saying no.
So for that reason, people behave the way they're behaving.
Because of the fact, unfortunately...
Actually, it contributes significantly.
Yeah, it does. Because of the fact because that's the thing. You often judge on your past experience, not about something that somebody's telling you now. Even if I had an experience with somebody and they come to tell me something, my first instinct is to remember what happened before. And that is then how my next action is going to be influenced. Unfortunately, that's how the brain works. Right?
The last time I asked you for money, I did not repay.
Then you come and ask me tomorrow.
The best thing you can do without being rude is look at them and then look away and then walk away.
Feel very sorry.
Yes, no.
For them.
No.
Because that's the thing.
Eric, when money is concerned, people don't feel sorry.
You know, we have heard the callers from Mombasa to Vihiga to Chuka to Kisumu, right? And everybody is basically saying everybody else. And getting to that point where I was asking somebody directly, so what are you doing? What is it that you are doing? We are still behaving like, well,
it's them.
It's people are not wearing masks.
Actually,
people are not washing their hands.
What we are hearing is what people, it's like a knee-jerk reaction that someone would say without thinking. If you listen to what Solomon said, he even gave us a personal experience. I am saying it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction where Solomon was concerned. Okay, it's clearly something he has given thought to. Remember, the talk about COVID has become commonplace. It's like a buzzword, COVID. Everybody talks about COVID. Yes. And so you could even ask, so what are people saying about COVID in your area?
Yeah.
It's interesting because somebody sent a comment and this is what they say. Rich Kenyans in posh gated estates wondering why the average Mwananchi isn't alarmed by the coronavirus. They say Kenyans are so stupid. They are not self-isolating. We aren't stupid, bro. This is the life we live every day. No healthcare coverage. No promise of food, state apathy, welcome to the party, grab a seat. It's hard to be alarmed when your entire existence is an alarm. Imagine telling a man in Kibera to self-quarantine over corona, a flu, when he grapples with malaria, pneumonia, and cholera on the daily to get his meal. Tell the man in Pipeline to avoid contact. How? The bourgeoisie finally see us. They finally realize that we exist and that we affect them. Panicking, they run to the estate. They say, lock it down. They say, if it hits Kibera, we are all dead. Not because it will kill the Kibera man, but because he presents a risk to them.
Who's this person?
It's interesting. This is Saul. His name is Saul.
Saul, you haven't said I am in Kibera or I am in Pipeline. And
yes, it is.
I wish Saul would give us his personal experience.
It is a lovely prose.
Yes.
It is. It's penned very nicely.
No, I was actually riveted and I was listening to you read it. It's a really nice prose.
However,
no, Eric is right. He doesn't tell us. He clearly has understood the basics of this and he's brought out something that is real, very, very real. It reminds me of a poem that I read many, many years ago. Many. Ationoyo. It talks about this young lady who becomes house help at a very young age, suffers looking after children who are more or less her age. And eventually she dies because I think she gets pregnant or something. And then her funeral, everything that she didn't get is lavished on her funeral when she's dead. You see, Saul brings this out when he says, this life that we're talking about, this life which is supposed to be alarming, that is the norm for the majority of Kenyans. And what is worse,
it's a different reality for them.
Yes, they have no expectations. That is why when you say they have no social capital, I kept quiet because I'm thinking this particular bird flew a long time ago. We've said it on this studio many times. Because if
Do you
even-
want to tell me, City?
Yes.
If we started seeing a number of deaths rising in these particular areas that Saul is talking about, that the people in those areas would still continue living the same way?
Yes, they would. Yes, they would. You mourn for a while, you panic for a while, and then you just get back to normal.
The people who told
The exact same normal.
the people who the people who told CT that okay, they knew about this HIV, right? And then they looked at this person after a week. The person looked like they were doing all right. What did they do? Back to factory settings.
Yep.
They've seen people dying. They've seen villages being ravaged, but back because
Do you
know
know?
what?
Do you know how terrible
this
it
is
was?
How we this is
It's
how what
somebody
this is what we
else's.
know, right?
Eric, when you work in the field, say, of HIV and AIDS, so you know people who are HIV positive because they're your clients and they're your patients. And then you go to a social establishment, what I normally call a cultural establishment, and you find there's somebody who is chatting with this person because they look really well, and you can see their intentions written all over their faces. Now, you have to maintain confidentiality. You cannot go and say, Nani, excuse
Please
me.
don't do what
so
you're
and
about
so."
to do.
Well, you also don't know the status of the other person. But you almost want to stop going to social places because you're in a state of turmoil. You're seeing danger. You're seeing lives being put in. As you watch, simply because you have information that some of these people don't have. And why? Because the earlier advertisements about HIV had to do with emaciated people or whom the skin was merely just hanging on them. You could see just bones.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's stuck. So if
That is what HIV is.
yes, you really need to look like you've been in a concentration camp. Now, when someone apparently looks normal, I remember someone telling me, but these drugs that you people give, they're making people even look better than they looked before they got sick. So how are we supposed to know? Now, what we were being told is how people perceive everything you've told them. It has to do with what they can see, which aligns with what they believe. For them, they need to see. But this is a case where any confidence the government would have had for its people, but it has, they make so much effort in eroding it.
Eroded.
Even when you think this time we'll go about getting it right, they erode it. But the national government has a partner. It's called the county government. They're doing an even better job at eroding it than the national government was doing it before. They are really eroding it for their people. Counties where they're actually trying to do something, we see them.
It's clear.
You know what Saul has raised there? It's an issue of the social divide.
Yes.
They're saying this bourgeoisie, they look at us and they expect us to behave this way. In fact, when they're saying lock down our densely populated area, it's not because they want
care
to save
about
us.
what's going to happen, right?
It's so that we don't bring it to them. That mentality is clearly everywhere. So the example that I said I was going to give you is the other day there was a school in Molo that had been announced that 18 members of staff in that school had tested positive. Well, they later tested negative, and they're waiting for the second test to know. This is a St. Andrew's Turi. Very many people around Elbagon, around Turi itself, and Molo work in St. Andrew's Turi. About 400 plus, right? So you can imagine the local community when they heard that school of the rich, the bougie, there's COVID there. The people who work there were actually being called by their Nyumba Kumi leaders and being told, do not come. Don't come back home. Stay with that COVID
There.
Stigma from the issue of class. It is that COVID is in that school.
But Eric,
Keep it there. Do not bring it to the community.
do you know why that stigma simply just gains momentum instead of reducing? There's an unspoken feeling that the things that should come to us, not go to these people, are taken by these people. Taken. When you are a government official and people see you driving some humongous, because these things are associated with huge cars, okay, and lush green neighborhoods, okay, it is assumed that you couldn't have acquired it unless you took money that was intended for people who are disadvantaged. And that thinking isn't going anywhere. It isn't.
So when they see it, they just think, well, you remember what we've just heard from Machuka? People are still thinking this must be a ploy by the government.
It's still not
it was
real.
Vihiga. Still a ploy by the government to make money, to
Look,
steal money.
And it's not a Kenyan thing. We heard the same reports coming out of the United States just over the weekend that there's still some people in the Midwestern United States who believe that COVID is not real. It's not real. It's just another attempt by people who have some kind of social agenda to push by letting us know that this disease has come and it's going to ravage. So we can't even this time we can't even tack it to some backward African mentality. It is something that is global. There are many people who still believe that this thing is not real.
Eric, in some far-flung place we worked in once, there were some locals who gave us insight into their thinking by telling us something which, well, we hadn't seen it in that light, but they made it clear. They said, you know something, you people, you should be doing more for us. Of course, and we asked why. I said, if it wasn't for this disease that we have, these big cars you people drive, you wouldn't be driving. And I thought that's an extremely valid point. Actually.
Yeah, but for HIV, you wouldn't be living the life you're living.
I said that's an extremely valid point.
And we are.
And
the subject.
My colleagues, I had some very interesting colleagues. They then, from that point, they determined and said, you know something, we need to understand. You know, these are actually our bosses.
Yeah.
So whenever people referred to our clients, they would say, our bosses are here. Our bosses are actually here, so let's attend to our bosses. And oddly enough, when you go to work knowing you're going to attend to your bosses, you think differently.
You suit up.
Your mind changes.
You may not think it does, but it does, because there's that reminder that actually in the absence of these sick people or these people who are infected, I wouldn't have the job that I have.
In the absence of these people that you should lead and govern over, in the absence of these individuals in a geographical location called Kenya, you wouldn't have the position that you have.
No, you wouldn't.
For the government officers to actually realize that and to remember that all the time. Thank you very much to the KTN home audience for tuning in this morning. We'll be back with you tomorrow, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. These conversations continue on Spice FM. We are on 94.4 in Nairobi. We are in Mombasa on 87.9. Kisumu and its environs, 102.5. 96.0 in Nakuru, 96.7 in Eldoret. Nyeri, 90.9. Malindi, 97.7. And if you'd like to catch us, you can still watch us on www.spicefm.co.ke. You can also watch us on Facebook. We are live streaming our pages, Spice FM KE. We are on YouTube, Spice FM KE. We also live stream on Twitter, Spice FM KE. Have a good morning. It's 5 minutes to 9.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM.
The behavior of Kenyans, and let's conclude with the behavior of our leaders. All right, so photos abound on our newspapers every day, every morning. You're seeing leaders in Western Kenya who are meeting, and the concept of physical distancing is not really here or there. Page 7 of the Standard. CS Eugene Wamalwa, Kakamega Governor Wycliffe Oparanya, and other leaders on Saturday. They later held a meeting at Musinda Muliro University. Well, they are wearing masks here, but you can see, the issue of physical distancing. And then in other meetings that you see them. You saw the other one, Senator of Kakamega, Boni Halwale, trying to, gain entry into the home of Hamisi MP Charles Gimose in Vihiga County, where they were going to have a meeting, and the police repulsed them. And they're justification is not about COVID, but you are allowing others to meet. Why aren't you allowing us to meet? And other leaders who we see constantly in public, not at all wearing masks, or even others like the Nairobi senator who there was an issue of whether, was he arrested, was he visiting the police station? Whatever happened, it was past curfew hours and he was at a police station. And now police say they're looking for him to go and record a statement.
But our leaders don't actually believe that the same law that applies to them applies to us. They don't, and by their behavior, they demonstrate this almost every time that they confront the law. They expect to be given a pass simply because they have a position of leadership. Even people who have actually been elected. You see, this idea of a positive example, somehow it doesn't resonate.
It's foreign.
No. Not just alien is the word I was looking for. It's completely alien. It's like leadership is something you lord on people. Yes. That's why I like Galangu, who calls himself Mtumishi. That's the right idea. That's what you actually are.
That's what you are.
That's what you are.
You're a servant of the people. Yeah. It's servant leadership.
When your focus is on your entire thing, this is why I said, you see, behavior is driven by the way we think. Huh?
Yeah.
If that's how you think, how are you going to serve these people? And you know very well that it's them who should serve you. They are there for you, not the other way around. So
it's about changing mindsets.
Yes, it is.
We are coming to the top of the hour. It's coming up to 9 o'clock. So today's proverb, CT.
There is always a winner, even in a monkey beauty contest.
I wonder what the Africans had in mind when they were thinking about this. There's always a winner, even in a monkey beauty contest. Can't wait for the top of the next hour so that City can give us the context of this, unwrap this thing for us. Good morning. This is A Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Keep it right here and also watch us on Spice FM KE, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter because the conversation continues. It's now 9 o'clock.
Mombasa Road is not too terrible until someone has been able to be involved in a hit and run. So somebody's been able to run away, meaning traffic is not so terrible today. Thika Road, however, is bumper to bumper. You could use Juja Road as an option, and it's flowing very, very well this morning. Apart from that, it doesn't look like we're going to have much problems in other parts of the city today. Westlands is moving along very, very well, as is Ngong Road. Langata Road also past the barracks and then to the T-Mall roundabout. It's going to slow down just a little bit right around Wilson Airport, but then you'll be fine moving either to Bagathi Way or then towards Uhuru Highway right after the Nyayo Stadium roundabout. So it looks like traffic is moving along very well this morning. In case anything does get stuck, we'll be able to let you know. You let us know as well. Spice FM KE on Twitter. That's how we can get in touch.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths.
He's speaking as somebody who is right in the thick of things, as it were.
He's aware of the shoe.
He's aware
of the shoe. It's his personal experience.
Yep. He knows exactly where it pinches.
Okay, so We hope to hear from you live on air one of these few days. So, shift the conversation a little bit. What's happening in Ethiopia?
It's what's happening among the countries who actually share the Nile. You know, when people think of the Nile, for the longest time, one thought of ancient Egypt, one thought of the irrigation systems that the Egyptians put in place, which were really way, way ahead of their time. And one also thinks of the Nile Delta, which for the longest time produced slightly more than half of what the Egyptians eat. When you talk of Ethiopia right now and the Great Renaissance Dam, the thing that appears in the media is what the Sudanese are saying, what the Ethiopians are saying, justifying what they're doing, saying we discussed these things long before we even put these things into play. The Egyptians are almost up in arms, saying that if this thing is completed, there's a lot of harm that will actually a lot of harm will visit us as a result of, one, the reduction of the flow of water to us. But one of the things that isn't said, that in the last 50 years, something like close to 25 dams have been built on that river. That's number one. And the one thing that any dam does, forget the Great Renaissance Dam, is that it changes the ecosystem of that particular area. There's something called silt. There's something called flooding, the natural flooding.
Yeah.
What flooding does is it shifts that silt. It moves it from one place and places it onto the other. And this is what contributes even to the fertility of the land. Right? Now, the moment you build a dam, what dams do, they accumulate water. But you accumulate the sediments and everything that comes with it. So, essentially what you've done, without even meaning to, is you've started eroding that particular ecosystem, which is what makes it possible for something like the Nile Delta to exist in the first place. Now, in the absence of that, what you're doing is you're encouraging soil erosion. And in so doing, remember, the Nile Delta and Egypt, they're next to the Mediterranean Sea. That is salt water. So what in essence you're doing is you're allowing salt water to seep into the delta. So the very thing that you created because of the Nile, because of the fork in the Nile, you suddenly find that this is not going to be possible. The discussion about the ecosystem was brought to the fore by Al Jazeera. And they had actually commissioned some scientists to talk about this and to look at it. And they brought this, and to them, this seemed to be the thing that ought to be focused on. The latest news, when the Ethiopians were asked whether their dams were actually filling faster than the scheduled time, because apparently, if the dam fills slowly, it doesn't really interfere with the flow. If it fills fast, then it most certainly does. That's very basic logic. But they said, no, we've had heavy rains. I think there are 4 seasons of rains. And the rains around this area, we've actually had lots and lots of rains. Now, there's a back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Now, the Ethiopians argue that with this dam, they're going to meet their electricity needs, the power needs, to the point where they'll be able to not just export, but they'll probably be the largest exporters of electricity or power in this region. The Nile is a resource. When you listen to this discussion, you'll think the Nile either emanates from Egypt or it emanates from Ethiopia. It doesn't. Remember, when we were talking about the building of the Kenya Railway, there was the issue of trying to find the source of the Nile. Remember? And people said, well, looks like it's Lake Victoria. Actually, none of those things. Right now, the information that currently people who've been doing research in this area, they said it actually emanates from Burundi. Karaka River. It's the biggest contributor to water that actually goes to the lake. Forget these. We have rivers that contribute.
So how does it connect to the White Nile or the Blue Nile?
You see, whether you call it the White Nile or the Blue Nile, it starts off as the Nile. So the distributaries are they gain the moniker White Nile, Blue Nile, but it starts as the Nile and then it branches off.
No, it meets as the Nile. It starts as the tributaries.
You see, look at the map.
Yeah, we start with the White Nile in Kenya, going into South Sudan, and then the Blue Nile in Ethiopia and Sudan.
Eric, the name that is given to the distributaries is the Nile.
Mm-hmm.
But look at the river as it is. Which came first, the river or the annexes?
Oh, the river, of course.
That's really the point I'm trying to make. Because even if you look at the lake, there is no lake if there are no rivers sort of like channeling water towards it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really my point. But the larger point that I'm trying to make here is this. There are those who argue that this particular issue about the Nile and the dam is one of those things that the media has given the twist of conflict. They have reported it in a way that seems to present that there's a constant conflict. But I don't really think so.
Well, what has been touted, I mean, just looking at what has happened recently, is that Ethiopia has always been looking for a factor that's going to have them united as a country. And this is insular unification. Now, if you look at the region now, this is a huge source, a huge resource that, exists within their country as having part of the Nile by virtue of the fact that part of the Nile then runs through Ethiopia. And now being able to use this resource then to unify its people. Because if we look at, again, conflicts around the world being based on resources, at the same time, sources of unification have, again, been resources. And this is what the government of Ethiopia is trying to use in this case. By the construction of this dam, to then say, with the construction of this dam, easily the largest in Africa, or what it's been touted to be, is that people's livelihoods then would improve within the country of Ethiopia, and then that would give them a much needed foothold that they've always been seeking in the region as a power source.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've been seen as, a country that has been able to build on peace initiatives and being stable in that sense. So this would be another opportunity for them to lay an even deeper foothold in the region by virtue of the fact that they were able to do something that then was bent on the resources and livelihoods of their people. Now, what they're saying in this case, in some quarters, is that Egypt, now fiddling with that, then stops them from being able to do this for their people. And then it hinges on sovereignty of the nation of Ethiopia.
Ask the question, which country does the largest part of the Nile pass through? Is it Egypt, is it Ethiopia, or is it Sudan?
It's the Sudans, if you think about them.
If you look at the geographical area of Sudan, yes. Now, the reason I'm asking this question is you hear louder voices coming from Egypt and Ethiopia.
It's a tussle between the two.
Yes, but you see, there's one little thing here. What is the greatest source of fresh water in Egypt? The Nile.
Mm-hmm.
Do you hear Kenya getting involved in that discussion?
Kenya, we're only a contributor to the Nile.
Precisely.
We raise noise because we're talking about, we are not allowed to do anything with this.
It's a common resource, really.
Yeah, with this water. Because the people who have the rights to use the water are Egypt and Sudan.
According to the treaty that was signed without our say-so, God knows how long ago, okay, this is also not a media construct, it's a fact.
Yeah.
Okay, but whether you like it or not, geographically, we have a portion of the lake.
Yep.
Do you hear Uganda kicking a fuss? No. Do you hear Tanzania kicking a fuss? No.
There has been conversation about let's review this treaty.
Yes, but that's not a fuss.
Yeah, let's review the treaty. For a moment, it was a fuss. And then the conversation goes with, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi coming all the way to Kenya and this talk just, fading. It's what the leadership, do we have a leadership that really wants to drive this conversation? And that's where the differences emerge.
When I was thinking about this, I kept asking myself, where does the AU fit into all this? Because I would have assumed that they would have taken a very central role in the discussions about these things, because the dam was not built in a week.
It wasn't. There was a lot of conversation about this. There was even dates. July is the month that that Ethiopia had said we're going to start filling the dam in July 2020.
Yes.
All right? It's going to take us either between 5 and 15 years to fill this dam. Now the conversation is, how fast do you fill the dam? So the ship has already sailed in terms of, are you going to build a dam or not? No,
that one is out. It's done.
It's now, how do we control usage of
the resource
in that dam? How do you fill it up? And I think that whole tussle that we keep seeing in the media about, like now even the latest one is Egypt is saying we're not going to just watch as you fill up the dam. And the Ethiopian minister saying, this is not even us filling the dam. It is
rainwater.
It's just rainwater that's just going into the dam. We haven't started filling up the dam. Chill, relax. And then Sudan says...
We have not done anything, you're complaining.
Sudan says we have seen satellite imagery that you guys are filling up the dam. So there's a proper conversation that is happening here. And the good thing is that it's not yet acrimonious.
It's acrimonious, Eric.
How so?
You see, when something gets that loud, I could argue that a lid is being put on the acrimony. Any discussion about the Nile, especially where the Egyptians are concerned, it's always acrimonious. Because to them, it's like a matter of national security. It's not just at water.
It's livelihood.
Oh, hey. I have never read of anything that touches on the Nile that the Egyptians have not approached, meaning on a war footing. It comes, they don't sort of like talk softly. They start from the very top.
They start from the top.
And then come down slowly.
The reason I'm saying it's not acrimonious is we haven't started hearing any war talks. These are two large militaries that we're talking about. The Ethiopian military with over 1 million soldiers.
Yes.
Egyptian military with all its resources. Acrimony is when you start talking about the two governments talking about...
Yeah, but Sudan is in the middle somewhere.
Yeah.
So
and Sudan is on the side of Egypt because it's one of the beneficiaries and users of the Nile. If it was acrimonious and those two, because they are speaking with one language, and they started now saying that, we have allowed troops to come in from Egypt to cross over into Sudan, and we are joining forces, and we are going to bring down that wall.
The way I see it, and why I keep insisting that there's acrimony, if you were part of a negotiation that took place and you didn't think carefully or read carefully between the lines, and you suddenly find that this thing that you agreed on or this thing that you supported isn't quite working out the way you want, what do? Do you accept and say you made a mistake?
No, of course not. I mean, when it comes to you're dealing with issues of diplomacy then between states, there's a certain je ne sais quoi that you must hold between
that one
that you must present before other nations that stacks up to your sovereignty. So you're not going to backtrack on things that you said before. It's going to make you look, a little fuddled if you look at it. You're still on je ne sais quoi. Interestingly,
is it one word?
No, it's just 4 words. Je ne sais quoi actually means I don't know what. There's a certain thing about it that would look odd should you backtrack on any statements that you've made that would apply to some kind of state sovereignty. And then if you did that, you would look rather ridiculous. Backtracked on what you said.
When there's talk of building, I
want to take a break.
Let's take a break.
Okay, so it's 9:15. It's a situation room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We are discussing regional issues now. The big dam in Ethiopia, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, and the politics that is generating around that region with Sudan, with Egypt, and also with the other countries that contribute to the waters in the Nile. Good morning.
All right, warming up just a tad in Nairobi, but still cloudy conditions. And we're going to see those continue for most of the day. At 14 degrees, we'll see it go to a high of 21 and lows of 12. In Nyeri today, cloudy conditions and still the order of the day at 13 degrees. We'll see a shower later, highs of 19 and lows of 12. It'll be a wet afternoon in Nakuru, currently at 13 degrees and partly cloudy. In Eldoret, the fog is still quite low at 14 degrees. Partly cloudy conditions will give way to thunderstorms later with highs of 19 and lows of 12. In Kisumu, it's mostly sunny at 22 degrees, highs of 26 and lows of 18. And in Kakamega today, we will see showers in the afternoon with a high of 24 and lows of 15. With partly cloudy conditions currently at 19 degrees. Let's take a look into Malindi, where it's mostly cloudy at 24 degrees, giving way to rains very soon, highs of 28 and lows of 24. And then in Mombasa, where it's mostly cloudy this morning at 23 degrees, we'll see a high of 28 and lows of 22. It's partly cloudy conditions in Kampala at 21 degrees, giving way to sunny conditions later, highs of 25 and lows of 18. All right, in Dar es Salaam, it's patches of fog this morning at 24, and it's going to continue that way through the day. A bit of sun, but the fog will remain quite low, highs of 29 and lows of 21. All right, taking a look then into Joburg, it's mostly sunny at 7 degrees, highs of 21 and lows of 3 with sunny conditions through the day. Lagos is clear skies this morning. It's going to change later though into rain, highs of 28 and lows of 23. Take a look in Europe as we wrap things up for weather this morning. It's partly cloudy in London at 13 degrees, highs of 22 and lows of 12. Looking into Paris, cloudy conditions at 18 degrees, highs of 27 and lows of 14. And it's Monday morning in New York, rather early though, but it's going to be clear skies at 27 degrees, a sunny day with highs of 37 and lows of 24.
Situation in Kenya's biggest conversation at 20 minutes past 9. We're discussing the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. This dam that has generated so much heat but no power yet for Ethiopia. It's a project that began in 2011, and there has been a lot of back and forth about, the issue now is when the government of Ethiopia should start filling up the dam and when it should stop. And then when it's full, the dam, how much water are you guaranteeing that you're going to be releasing to go downstream? And this is where Ethiopia is refusing to commit. According to a story by the BBC posted 3 days ago, it says the false impression is that filling up the dam will be like filling up a bath and that Ethiopia can turn on and off a tap at will. That's not the case. The reservoir behind the dam will fill naturally during Ethiopia's rainy season, which began in June and will last until September. Given the stage that the construction is at, there is nothing that can stop the reservoir from filling to the low point of the dam. Mm-hmm. So that is a natural process. As it began over the last couple of years, 9 years or so, when they were constructing this dam, they were doing everything else around the Blue Nile. Until now, they went into covering up the area of the Nile so that it's covered and starts flowing. It starts collecting water. When it's full, this will create a lake that stretches 250 kilometers. Huge lake, the largest. The issue that Egypt and their friends in Sudan have, because they almost entirely rely on the Nile for water needs, their concern is that in most years of the filling, they have no guarantee of a specific volume of water coming down the Blue Nile into Sudan, into Egypt. Because this thing is just being built at the border with Sudan.
You know what is even strange? If you look at the map of the three countries, you'll find the part of the Nile that is actually in Ethiopia covers the smallest area. The bulk of it is in Sudan.
Yep.
Then it is in Egypt. But this is why, I was thinking of a parallel to this.
So Sudan, basically, Ethiopia is the source of the Blue Nile. This is where most of the Blue Nile waters come from, Ethiopia.
It is.
And then they flow into Sudan. Mm-hmm. They meet with the White Nile. They become the bigger Nile into Egypt. So Ethiopia is basically saying, rain falls onto the ground, forms a river, we just want to use it to generate power.
It reminds me of a parallel in this country, and that was the decisions that were made around the port. You see, if you look at just the port, whether it is CFSs, whether it's lorries, whether it's what, the thing that probably doesn't occur to one is that if, say, for instance, when it has happened in areas where they grew sugarcane, suddenly, because of irregular importation of sugarcane, sugar factories died. Let's say you went to a place where they grew tea, and that's the mainstay for most people in terms of employment and livelihood, and you literally uprooted the trees. That would be the parallel. Or you went to communities that are pastoralists, and you killed their cows.
Yeah.
Because, you see, the maritime commerce was actually the lifeline, and is the lifeline of very many people at the coast. Now, I think for the Egyptians and for the Sudanese, when you've had a resource that has been there for that long, you take it for granted. It's been there. So you've built your lives around it. It's something that you can rely on because it's never gone anywhere. Now, so the moment there's lack of clarity or something has been brought and it seems to threaten, operative word seems.
Conflicts.
Yeah.
Well,
Straight up.
it is certainly a platform from which conflict can arise. Yet it doesn't need to arise. It doesn't.
Historically, that has always been the case.
What I've asked is, isn't there a discussion that perhaps we're not hearing about that is taking place? Because was there this much noise when they started, when there was groundbreaking? Not that I remember. Does anybody remember any noise about it?
No.
4 years ago, there was mention, but there wasn't noise. Now, the thing is nearing completion. It's nearing completion. I mean, this thing, and the argument also has been that there are very, very few projects of this nature where due diligence has been done to the degree that has been done with this one.
And this is what I'm saying. Look at all of those factors. Number one, you have a resource which is likely to provide, which is going to provide for the people of Ethiopia in a way that it has never done before when it comes to water, when it comes to electricity generation, etc., etc. And then you have a project which also diplomatically and also then lending to state sovereignty is going to shed light on the fact that Ethiopia truly then is a regional powerhouse. All of these things cannot be ignored. And so by the time it's about to be completed and then suddenly somebody's complaining that you're filling too fast, number one, because you also see it. Ethiopia knows very well what they're doing when they're providing resources for their people, but at the same time, there's a message that's being sent out to people that look at what we are doing. What did you just mention? That they were able to actually apply due diligence and have a project completed in the time in which they said they were going to do it, and what it is going to then be able to do for its people and also for those of neighboring countries. It cannot be ignored as to how then that lends to its big brother status in the region. It does, absolutely. They know that. Everybody else who's watching knows that. Something that nobody else has been able to do in the region to that magnitude. It definitely adds to its profile. State sovereignty, giving it 1,000,000 points at once. And to be able to say that actually, you know what, for something like that, who are we going to look to? Yet again, Ethiopia. And they say, yes, accolades, we shall collect. So when you start to make noise, you're essentially tinkering with this ideology that they've taken these 4 years to set up. There's no way they're going to keep quiet. Absolutely not. They're going to say, why would you want to play around with something that we've meticulously set aside?
It's a whole
and we
policy.
know that this is what it's going to do for us.
It's a whole policy by Ethiopia on how they want to develop themselves.
And how they want to operate in the region and how they want to be seen in the region.
They saw clearly that their population is going to rise. Their population is going to double. Just like for many other African countries, the population is rising rapidly. And what are we going to do about it? So here's a government that started thinking and doing things about what's going to happen to itself, to the country, right? There are very many other reforms. Well, yeah, we still have a lot of conflict internally in Ethiopia, but very many other reforms that happen in Ethiopia in terms of opening up the economy, in terms of setting up industries in Ethiopia. All these things were happening. And at the same time, they started saying, all right, so we need power. For us to become industrialized, we must have energy. And where do we get energy? Let's look. We have
water.
We have this resource
we have
here.
this resource here. We have the other one called the Omo that feeds water into Lake Turkana. Let's work on that. So they build their dams along River Omo. Then they look at this big one and they're like, we're going to start working on this project. They break ground. At the time when they were breaking ground in 2011, Egypt was sort of slightly distracted by the spring, the Arab Spring.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit distracted. The Ethiopians just moved on. When these guys are coming to start a conversation, the project has already kicked off. And there's nothing that was signed by the British with Ethiopia telling them do not touch this water.
No.
Unlike Kenya and Uganda,
Well, you can't
where there were
touch.
treaties, Ethiopia,
Which was signed on our behalf.
Ethiopia, because they were not colonized, they didn't sign anything. So here
you know
you
what is
are.
of interest, actually, when you think about it. All three countries actually have problems within their countries. Egypt, yes, stable now, but they have issues.
They have issues.
Sudan has issues.
Yep.
South Sudan has its own issues, but Sudan, Northern Sudan have issues. Ethiopia has
Have
issues. So this Nile conversation, Eric, you don't break ground until you've agreed on certain things. And it's not as though this public participation excluded someone. No. The Ethiopians didn't build these things on their own. They brought in other people, other players, people who've done these things before, people who understand how these things must be done. And that conversation, long before even
Breaking ground.
there were discussions.
Yeah.
Arab Spring notwithstanding, there were discussions. Why am I bringing this in? I'm saying that sometimes it's something that politicians do very well. If you want to divert your citizenry from the problem that you have internally, you really have to look outside the country. Yes. So that becomes a focus. We have this problem we need to look at. And by the way, the Nile is a real problem. It is a problem. It's a serious resource, but it's a huge problem for other people.
Those that have predicted that the next wars are going to be fought over water and other resources, natural resources.
That prediction is not far-fetched.
Do you see us heading towards that kind of point with this particular Renaissance Dam?
Kenya, look at it this way. If you're talking about the Nile, Ethiopians have had a lot of internal turmoil for a very long time. North Egypt have had their issues. They removed Bashir, they did what? They haven't arrived at a peaceful
Sudan.
peace. Sudan, sorry, that's Egypt. No, I meant Sudan. Southern Sudan aren't doing any better on that front.
No.
Okay? Then you go to Egypt, they aren't doing any better at that front.
Because dealing with a president that they brought in who they thought was okay, the better of the lesser evils, or the more, and then thought, okay, backtracking on that decision and say, okay, this one that we tried to oust is actually worse off than the one, So they're also dealing with a lot of political issues in there.
All
as
three
we
countries
speak.
have serious political issues that they're dealing with. Both. And it didn't start yesterday. In fact, it almost looks as though the time when Mubarak was president, they were far more stable.
Yes. And they've come to that realization even after.
So for
They've
each
come
of
to
these
that.
governments, this resource could be something that you use to distract your people
Oh, it's very easy.
from other internal squabbles and
It
just
would.
point them. We have an enemy called Ethiopia, or we have an enemy called Egypt that is blocking us from developing. How are we going to develop as a country if we don't have a regular and sustainable source of power, source of energy?
Do you remember?
This is it. We have constructed this thing for so many years. It took us so much amount of money to put this up, and now they're telling us to not fill the dam.
If you observe the discussion, there's no discussion that you hear of that focuses or maybe diverts just slightly to the benefits that Sudan and Egypt might have as a result of this.
Yep.
The benefits the discussion just seems to be the benefit from Ethiopia.
Yep.
Over what they consider a shared resource.
Let's take another break and take a look at traffic at 9:30. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation.
All right, it's looking good, guys. I don't think we have much of an issue around. It seems that everything that was a problem about half an hour ago has been sorted. Traffic is not so crazy right about now. It'll take you a minute to get where you're going in many different directions of the city, but not out. Just out of traffic hour, we shouldn't have much of the problems that we saw earlier. Good to go this Monday. Spice of MKE, just in case anything does pop up, let us know. But for now, you should be fine.
Traffic.
So if we shift the gears a little bit, looking at the emerging conflicts around resources, right? The whole of things, but now the current conflicts around resources across borders and what they protect. Now this one, the Grand Ethiopian Dam, there's the dam on River Omo that is going to impact, really impact Lake Turkana, the levels of Lake Turkana,
Spice up your life.
Who live around Lake Turkana, and the others. What is it that regional bodies then ought to be doing?
You know, you've gone to regional bodies, and I'm thinking, what is AU? I would have assumed that this is something they would have been smack in the middle of, and they would have been steering in this direction and foreseeing, because we didn't start building dams in our rivers yesterday.
If the African Union was unfortunately not just a puppet organization dealing with issues on the surface, if it was actually cracking down to the meat and marrow of the matter that visionaries like the late Muammar Gaddafi had for the organization in the first place, then perhaps we would not be seeing the acrimonious murmurings that we are seeing today. But I say if. Unfortunately, we have a slapstick organization that wants to work with surface level issues and wants to, make a suggestion here or there, but going into the depth, real matters of the continent and countries involved in whatever treaties or organizations that they push for certain agendas, if they were really going deep into the matter, perhaps then we would see some kind of intervention. But unfortunately, like I said, we have a puppet organization with a name and, some headquarters here or there that is really not doing what its original vision for it to do in the first place was.
Hey. You describe this thing. Whoa.
Gone all out.
But I'm just telling you.
Be kind. So what role has AU played? What role have who's this that's mediating between these countries currently?
There is no mediation per se. What you've heard so far is what everybody that is involved has had to say about it. There's been no interventions by anybody at this point to say, all right, guys, stand down. Let's have a discussion and arbitrate between the two of you and see what we can do. Nobody has stepped forward. And that's what I was saying. Had we.
But there have been negotiations between these countries. So who is this that is arbitrating this?
From what you read, they've been talking among themselves.
It's bilateral communication.
Yes,
that's what's been going on.
The Minister for the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister for it's their own people.
There's nobody who has come in and circumvented the process in terms of let us come and have a chat. No.
Probably because at this point they did not want to involve an external source or an external body.
I would have argued differently that when there's a common resource such as this one here, that common body gets involved from the very beginning.
If
it should be the one that is.
That's what you should have.
You put yourself smack them because somewhere along the line, look.
Because that is what your identity is as an organization.
Every time that takes the length of time this thing has taken, what if governments change? Yeah. And we know how our governments on this continent are when they change. Somebody can come and decide, well, them as far as they're concerned, them they were not part of it's the turmoil that we have in the Sudan area, north or south. Doesn't look like it's going to go away tomorrow. LCC isn't having it very easy.
Nope.
Okay. Ethiopia seemed to have calmed down. Seemed. So, the East African Community, does it include Ethiopia?
No.
Does it include
Maybe it could have.
Does it include Sudan?
Not yet.
So, it's only AU. That's why I went straight to AU.
Yeah. Now, if the AU was not the Tea Party inviting kind of
By the
organization
way,
that it is,
what-
So there
then-
have been some talks, and this is just
talks.
in the month of June, chaired by the current chair of the African Union, South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, or with the three countries. Sudan and Egypt said afterwards that Ethiopia had agreed to hold off on filling the reservoir as negotiations continued, and Ethiopians released a statement that made no mention of a delay. All right, what they had agreed. Trilateral talks on the dam resumed earlier this month, with the biggest sticking points concerning how to operate the dam during periods of drought and how to resolve the disputes. This is what is happening, right? Diplomatic sources, the UN Security Council has planned to meet to discuss the objections to the dam raised by Egypt and Sudan. So you see, even the UN Security Council is involved here. The chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, who was also on Friday's call, said afterwards that the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, the President of Egypt, and the Sudanese Prime Minister had agreed to an AU-led process to resolve outstanding issues. Right? So the AU has already come in and it's already asking them, come on, all right, guys, so your own trilateral talks have not worked. So let's now come in as the AU and lead this mediation process.
it would be interesting to see what the result of this mediation process would be, whereby you have a project that already is at completion stage, right? And it is at this point then that a regional or continental organization then gets involved.
Wait.
When the Spitfire has already begun.
The Egyptians took this matter to the UN, you know that?
Yeah.
They did.
Which is why the others are saying, no. Before we go to the UN, let AU be the first port of call.
Why do you think they took it to the UN first?
They didn't know the
Why?
UN existed.
Why?
So they know their own local
just-
body.
They know what would have been or what would have resulted,
What? Which is what?
which is maybe just a lack of, a kind of laid back approach to issues.
Abiy Ahmed already believes and says, yeah, before we go to the UN, why don't we just deal with the AU first? Let's actually have this issue resolved locally at the AU level. Before we go to the UN Security Council, let's have this issue. And that's why we're seeing the president of, the chairman of the AU and the chairman of the AU Commission coming together and saying, all right, so first of all, let's first agree. No date for filling the dam as the beginning of this conversation.
And yet the dam is filling.
Yeah, they continue. And then Ethiopia said, well, look, we can't, you
It's
said no
floods.
date is okay. The dam is already filling, but we are not the ones filling it.
It's
It's
floods.
the rain. The rain on the earth, the dam.
And it's impossible.
By-
and
Sudan
other,
is
that
saying,
it will fill.
it's not rain.
Egypt said no.
and
It's
other
not
experts,
rain.
even if it went to the UN, that would be the same
It would be
story.
the same story. Exactly.
The issue here is who are they most likely to listen to?
They should be most likely listening to the AU. Unfortunately, it's a thing of saying, just like we did, bring in an external force. That's the one that is most likely to be neutral, without considering the fact that that other external source also has their own game plan.
Oh, yes, they do. And it may have nothing to do with your game plan.
Nothing at all. So the best thing to do is look internally, which is why I was bringing the issue. What is the role of the regional bodies? The AU in this particular case comes in very handy and says, this is a matter that it's a matter that we come in and help mediate between the three countries.
You know, Eric, there's something you mentioned, and perhaps to get a better perspective. The conflicts that we have, for instance, in DRC. Do you think DRC would have the problems it has if it didn't have the resources it has?
No.
No, it wouldn't.
No.
It wouldn't. All those Anglo-Boer wars, Zulu wars, all those things that are fought in South Africa, you think they would have been fought if there were no resources in South Africa?
Of course not.
So, we are not talking about something that is new. And how DRC is a work in progress. And that situation doesn't look like it's going to end soon, because essentially, DRC looks more to me like a feudal state than anything else. They have provinces which are semi-autonomous, though they actually, if you're semi-autonomous and you have your own little army, well, that sounds to me more like it's autonomous. But there's a larger point here. How is it that resources that traverse the boundaries of countries do we have examples of countries that have been able to manage this sort of thing without it creating the sort of issues that we now hear arising? As you said, it doesn't reach boiling point, but it's arising. Do we know of examples of countries that have managed shared resources peacefully, amicably?
Usually it has resulted from conflict. By the time they're able to share these resources and have an amicable cooperation over those resources, conflict has taken place, right? And unfortunately, it seems as though conflict is the way to go, then to get you to the place when you realize, hold on a minute, we can actually share this thing and both of us can benefit, simultaneously. But unfortunately, around the world, that's what it has been.
The way to bring people to a table is let them fight first.
No, I'm not saying that's the way. I'm saying that has been the way. That's how we see it. Even people now who share resources, people who've then been able to make an agreement, it has come as a result of conflict, unfortunately.
During the problems and the clashes we had 2007, 2008, in the aftermath, I saw something very strange. There are areas we're working in which were in Luo land. But suddenly, there was, and I didn't know, the clinic was in one part of that particular area, the sub-county. Suddenly, in the aftermath, when we were continuing their work, it became an issue. When people said then they cannot go to that clinic. And innocently we asked, why?
Why?
Said, yeah, but that clinic was built on the land of that particular clan. I thought, hey, but this clinic was not built yesterday. Said, yeah, but most of the people who are employed there also come from that clan.
And it's something that they know that they can't operate within, yeah?
Now, there was no wall, there's no fence dividing these two communities. Nothing. So, an outsider like me didn't come from there. As far as I was, they had a clinic. Suddenly they didn't have a clinic. This clinic belonged to that clan. And so the question was, why are you people taking resources to that clan? And I'm thinking, hey.
When did this emerge?
It has gone beyond the issue of it. So why are you taking it to that clan?
So conflict brings issues.
Yes, that had lain dormant. And by the way, when I say they were not going to attend, they stopped literally. It took some very serious mediation. But it opened our eyes to one thing. Being sensitive to understanding dynamics. Don't just go to a lady and think you understand it. Understand it clearly. Ask questions. Find out.
And then it also means that these people were already feeling this. I mean, it's not something that was brought out by the conflict.
No. The conflict simply brought out something that had already existed.
It was a trigger.
It was a serious trigger.
For a long time, they kept, murmuring amongst themselves, this clinic belongs to those guys. Or those ones would keep telling them, this one is on our side. Mumekuja kwetu. One day, you people also need your own clinic one day.
Now, when you open your eyes to that, then you suddenly realize that it is not something that was isolated. No. Suba, for instance, the headquarters of Suba is a place called Sindo. It's not even Bita. That's where the administrative center is. Now, you'll find that the biggest hospital in that area is not even the one in Sindo or Mbita. They're both big hospitals. The big hospital is in a place called Kisegi. And so I asked. So no. There was a guy who comes from there who was Minister for Health. It's like you're reading a novel.
And he went and built this one.
Well, there was a government plan, government funding to build a hospital. And at that point in time, when we had these discussions, maybe several years back, Kisegi is like perched on a hill, sort of. The road leading there, God Almighty, you don't want it to rain.
So you have a huge facility, but accessibility.
Precisely, it can't. It's barely utilized.
Is it that this place has a smaller population than Sindo and?
The moment a place is hilly, unless you actually come from there, it is hardly likely that anybody else other than the people who come from that particular vicinity are actually going to.
So there are no big commercial centers there?
No. It is a village one. It's on a hill. Remember the rest, Beta, Sindo, next to the lake. So they're commercial centers.
Right. There's no resource on this other side that is going to attract people to then want to come and either do business there or live there, as it were.
Now,
the people who would remain there are the original inhabitants of that area.
Now, the person I was told who did that thought he was bringing development to his people.
Yep.
But ask yourself, that resource is probably utilized well now, but it wasn't the best place to have built that particular resource. So by building it, this is someone who was fermenting discord, and they probably hadn't given it much thought.
Yeah.
But indeed, there was going to be discord.
And as far as they were concerned, they were also doing what their own people wanted.
Yes. As far as he's concerned, I brought it to this area.
Yeah, people would have asked him, so you're Minister for Health, and you're going to build a hospital in Sindo.
Now, you see,
are you saying that we don't fall sick?
Only
the people of Mbita and Sindo fall sick. And you're Minister for Health.
Now,
and you're going to come and ask us for votes.
That was imagine now. If in a place where you think people share the same language, people are related, people have intermarried, and you come across such a thing, first of all, it throws you back.
Yeah.
And you wonder, what underlying issues must they have been? And then you will find it's something as simple. Someone tells you, this clan, there's a whole history. Who did what? So you now get immersed into this. Now, with this dam, this is where I'm getting to. A new history is being created. Because there are future generations who will take the point from this one. These guys just built this thing to give us a hard time.
Yeah.
That's where they're going to start off.
Yeah.
They're going to start off by saying, the headwaters of the Blue Nile is actually Ethiopia.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. What? Since the Nile. Yeah, it is, but,
The reason we're having starvation now, the reason for a long time we've never had a problem of shortage of food.
It's because of the Ethiopians. And the truth of the matter is that the Egyptians have more than one dam on that Nile.
Yep.
Truth.
Already.
Yes. So even their Nile Delta had started being affected, the ecosystem was being affected by the dams
their own dams
had built.
11 minutes to 10. Let's take a quick break. This is a Situation Room.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM.
So standoff for the largest power generating plant in Africa, one of the largest dams in Africa, and now there's a standoff between those three countries. Matter has been referred to the UN Security Council. Matter has also been taken up by the AU. How should it be resolved, this one? If you were Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, what would you?
Actually,
or should we say, if you were somebody else, if you were a fly on the wall?
These three fellows have to talk this thing out.
Come on,
believe me, a mediator can only move as far as these people are willing to let the mediator move.
The question you have to ask yourself is that with the operations of Ethiopia, what imminent danger then does it cause to the peoples and livelihoods of Egypt, the peoples and livelihoods of Sudan? That one is very clear at that point. Is there anything that they're doing that is going to cause death, that is going to cause famine, that is going to cause any kind of other danger in these other countries?
Yeah, when they don't commit to how much water they'll be releasing, which is where now Ethiopia is refusing to put up. They're not saying.
Maybe
because that's where the conflict is.
But maybe even they don't know.
Two issues of conflict. One, when are you going to start filling up this dam? When do you expect to finish?
When are you officially going to start filling this dam? And at what pace are you going to?
At what pace? And then, how much water shall you be releasing during the low season? Flood season, of course, we expect
everybody has water.
A lot of
water is going to come. When it's low season, how much water are you going to be releasing from this dam? And that is where Ethiopia is not really getting committal.
The
they sound like basic issues.
Right.
Sound like there should be issues that you just agree, all right, so scientifically, look, during the low season, this is how much water we'll be getting into the dam in the first place. All right? This is how much water we receive on the Blue Nile that will be going into the dam. So this is how much water we need for the first level, the turbines, and then the second level of turbines. As long as we have this, then we can be releasing. Or shall you be saying that during the low season, if it gets to a certain point where the water is X number of cubic meters, then you shall switch off your turbine so that you can release more water. It's a commercial decision and a political decision.
For sure.
Commercially, because you're entering into contracts with other countries that you'll be supplying power to. Now, you don't want to come to Kenya and say, I'll be selling you power. But no, it will be depending.
We have power.
Whether we have water.
I think within everything, however we choose to look at it, within everything lies an amicable solution if people are just ready to sit down at the negotiating table. And to get people to the negotiating table and to really get them to think with a clear mind usually is the problem. Usually is the issue. And if you're able to do that, at that point when they're having that discussion, it's
these people are politicians.
Of course. Yeah. And this is what I'm saying. No. But at the end of so then you have to ask yourself the question then is that, do they really want to solve the problem? Here the world is clamoring and saying solve the issue, solve the issue.
They do, but which is a priority?
Which is a priority for them?
I mean, ask yourself, look, I'm El-Sisi. What danger am I facing? Do I actually have immediate danger from Ethiopia? The answer is actually no.
No.
So where are my real problems from? But how can this Ethiopian issue now help me solve mine?
Yeah.
I am one of those generals in Sudan. What do I consider to be a big problem? Again, it's not Ethiopia. But how can this Ethiopian dam help me solve my problems here? Because the problems I have at home are real. So how do you find a middle ground in all this? The Ethiopians found a solution to their problems. By building this dam, we can bring our people together.
They've solved so many things. Yeah. You can bring our people together. We take a leg up the ladder in terms of regional affairs and regional politics and become the poster child for development and such. Sorted.
Southern Sudan don't seem to be a problem because, you see, you become a little thorn in the flesh if there's some cohesion. And so right now, they are busy sorting that one out. So they're fully occupied.
They're busy, a bit busy at the moment.
Maybe South Sudan should actually start talking about putting up their own dams.
Now that would make for some genuinely interesting conversation. Because now the noise would be really loud.
Yes. The Nile that flows through the South Sudan.
There's a lot of Nile.
It's big enough.
No, there's a lot of Nile.
There's a lot
of Nile.
And South Sudan needs power.
South Sudan, first of all, needs peace.
South Sudan just needs to operate from for a while without much issue.
Those things are not difficult to sort out once, if you're getting along together. But if you still have murderous thoughts towards each other, it becomes a bit difficult.
It becomes an issue.
No. But the question I want to ask Eric is this. We're watching these things happening to our neighbor. And our neighbors, because these are our neighbors. Even Egypt may appear like they're not really that far.
No.
Now, how do we ensure that we ourselves don't forget we don't have other nations bothering us, but we have enough bother among ourselves? But I don't think, as far as our leadership is concerned, we are very far removed from that particular issue. No. There's nothing to learn and there's nothing to actually garner from all that. After all, it's Ethiopia and Egypt. And we know Ethiopia is not around the corner. And we know Egypt is definitely not even around the other corner.
I'm sure there are people at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who are actually very, very, very much involved in these current conversations. Very much involved.
Eric, you're a man of faith.
I am sure there are.
You are a man of great faith. Actually, there would be.
Among the markets for that power is Kenya.
Eric, we have more power than we can utilize.
Currently, that's what they say. But
we have more power than you could possibly use.
No,
looking at future needs or future.
Just like
would be
Ethiopia,
an
you think
issue
Ethiopia
for
doesn't
many
have enough
people.
power currently? They do have enough power currently, but they're looking at future.
No, they don't have enough power currently.
With all the dams that they have built along the Omo, they have enough power to power their
Currently,
plants.
no, they don't. You see, the power isn't for people to be using in their houses. It usually has to do with
For
the plants you
industrial,
have.
yes.
For industry
And the
and
plants
yeah.
are the same kind of thing. That the reason why we're even having all these, the Amu power plant with the coal and all, is because of looking at what is our expected demand in X number of years. Shall we meet it? Shall we not? Anyway, we're coming to the end of the show. Thank you very much for tuning in this Monday morning on the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. CT, now is a time for you to tell us what these monkeys were doing.
I think Ndu actually got to the heart of the matter without even realizing it. Even in the most unusual and the ugliest of situations and bizarre situations, if people are willing to actually arrive at a solution and come to one mind, you can. You see, we don't regard monkeys or that particular family of primates, we regard them as pests. They eat your maize, they eat your plants, they bother you. And so when somebody calls you a monkey, it's not complimentary. Usually it's an insult of the highest possible order, which means if you're talking about the origin of species, you haven't evolved that much yourself. So hence the comparison. Something that society doesn't regard very highly, and saying that even they have things of beauty. Even this animal that you don't regard highly. So even in the ugliest of situations, the most dire of situations, if you want to look for the beauty or the good in it or the possible solution to this problem that seems insoluble, you can find it.
The proverb again?
There's always a winner, even in a monkey beauty contest.
I see. That's today's proverb. And it's an African proverb.
African. We're not going to grant it to anyone. African. So it's ours.
It's ours.
Yes.
It's all of us. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Join us again tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Signing off is CT Muga, Nduoko, Eric Latif. Between now and what time again?
3 o'clock.
Between now and 3, what happens?
Uninterrupted soul music. And then
At 3 o'clock, what will we interrupt ourselves with?
Monique will come in on the Spice Drive until 7 o'clock, where Emmanuel, Barbara, and Eric will be the adults in the room.
All right. Good morning. It's 10 o'clock. See you tomorrow.